Welcome to Boulder City City Council special meeting, and Madam City Clerk, calling the meeting to order. Roll call, please, and posting.
Yes, thank you. The agenda was posted in accordance with Nevada open meeting law, and all members are present in the chamber.
Thank you. We will now open the meeting for public comment. Anybody who's would like to come forward in public comment is more than willing to come up, or please call at 702-589-9629.
Pam Triolo. I've been elected by our little group up here. We've read over the questions and everything, and since it is part of the strategic plan, we were hoping to see something about the ADA and accessibility on the questions. So just letting you know, we didn't see one.
Thank you. Anyone else here in chambers like to come forward? If every single person came forward, it would be very helpful. If not, please call in 589-9629 and see someone on the phone.
Public comment.
Yes, good afternoon. For the record, Fred Volz. It's underwhelming that the headhunters chose to use MK Circle Enterprises software. We have few concise and meaningful insights concerning performance and interpersonal skills, but much empty blather that fails to present substantive information. One can find more insight about candidates' emotional intelligence from city websites and newspaper reports. For two of the three finalists, Messrs. Jordan and Thomas, taking the Boulder City job would be a downgrade from their previous duties. Why would they want to come to Boulder City and make a long-term commitment for a lesser position? After the problem of terminated for cause city manager Alfonso Noyola buying a house 35 miles away as soon as he was hired by Boulder City, this is a problem even for Mr. Thomas, who has lived for 5 years in far less expensive Paradise Hills, Henderson. Renting a pretend apartment doesn't equate to living here. The strongest candidate from the posted materials would appear to be Mr. Romani. His current duties as deputy city manager in Carson, California, encompass some of the most important areas where Boulder City needs remedial action. The Boulder City job would be a clear promotion and advancement in his career. His leadership, not just membership, in the California League of Cities finance area demonstrates an ability to work with others, along with his steadily increasing responsibilities in a mix of large and small jurisdictions across 3 states. It is very concerning that Mr. Jordan has twice been paid to go away and not sue his former employers. He has been out of a job for 4 years, and a South Pasadena, California job offer was rescinded at the last minute. It is equally troubling that Mr. Thomas has only been city manager in Milpitas, California for 17 months, but is willing to bail on them to cut his chosen long-distance commuting while not living in that community. Not a good sign he would be committed to Boulder City for even 5 years, which is what headhunters told us was the most we could hope for from any candidate. As with bank certificates of deposit, where both sides commit to paying a predetermined interest rate and leaving the money on deposit for a specific length of time, Boulder City needs to take heed. When CD money is withdrawn early, there is an early withdrawal penalty. Similarly, in any employment contract drafted by the city attorney, there should be a provision that a voluntarily departing city manager taking another position must pay an early withdrawal penalty or the headhunter fee to prematurely find a replacement. We do not need another Taylor Tedder abrupt departure, and I would ask that these comments be added to the record of the meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else on the phone? 702-589-9629. And while we're waiting for that, if anyone wants to come forward and in public comment and say anything that they would like about our agenda items, or in this case, agenda item. 702-589-9629. Anyone on the phone? We will close public comment and move to our special agenda. And we will now have our consultant come and introduce us to our number one agenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Council. Nice to see you all again. My time right now I'm going to spend on is to give the public a little summary on the history of where we've been, as well as open up to any questions from you with regards to that, talk a little bit about what we've been doing today, and then also talk about our questions that we've put together and how we're going to ask those questions, then also deciding who's going to be asking those questions before we get started today, and kind of how that will look. I'm recommending that we do a structured process as well as a more informal process where you turn it over to the candidate for questions, and then hopefully if you have follow-up questions, they're encouraged. So we'll talk a little bit more about questions. As far as history, I'm just going to open my book here just to make sure I don't make any mistakes. We've had over 100 applicants apply for the position. During the process, not only did we screen the candidates based on the ideal candidate profile that we put together, and just as a reminder to everybody, and including the public, we met with each of you, both in public as well as individually, to hear what you were looking for in an ideal candidate, get a good sense of the history of this position, some of the challenges, what you're looking for, where your community is right now, some of the challenges that you have, some of the things that your wants that you have, and where you see this community in the next 5 years. And based off of that, and also just the community nuances, is just getting to know what you were looking for in both the technical areas of expertise as well as interpersonal. And so gathering all of that information, and after doing a national search, we came up with 106 applicants. We screened those candidates based on paper initially, and then did Zoom or phone screens with most of those candidates. We did over 20 of those with the candidates that were coming up to the top on paper screen. And then from there, moved them forward to a panel that was selected in our last public meeting that we had with members of the community. After that, 3 candidates were recommended to move forward, and that's who we invited to interview today. Unfortunately, one of those 3 candidates is not going to be able to participate today due to a health emergency, and so today we have Chris Jordan and Ned Thomas. So both of those candidates will be interviewing with you today. Part of the interviewing process will be to ask the 7 questions that you have in front of you, as well as any follow-up questions that you might have. How each candidate responds to your initial question is unique, so your follow-up questions may be unique. They may be similar. It's okay. So I'm encouraging you to ask as many follow-up questions that are coming up. We are going to try and keep those questions to 5 minutes, so if you can keep an eye on that. I will let you know when I feel like we're running out of time, but this is your time, and with the other candidate not being here, we obviously have a little bit more time as well. I do want to make sure, though, that we get through all the questions, and also when we get to the point where we're going to ask the candidate to ask questions of you, there might be more back and forth conversation style questions that can come from the podium as well, and from you as well. So any questions about where we are, where we've been so far? And I should mention also what we did today. So the candidates went on a tour today for an hour this morning of the city. After that, we had a meet and greet with the public, which was great. I thought it was, there was a lot of people here, so it was probably around 20 or 30 people. It was a little bit of a mingling, walking around, meet and greet, but also some time where they answered structured questions that came from the audience of both candidates. And it seemed to have gone really well. And then we had a department lunch where the candidates got a chance to connect with the city department heads. And that seemed to have gone really well too. Lots of good time, good conversation. So I want to turn it over to the council and see if you have any questions before we dive into the details of the questions. Okay.
Oh, I have a question.
Yes.
So you said 7 questions, but I have 2 pieces of paper. One basically that says City of Boulder City City Manager, and the other one says City Manager additional questions. So
Yes. And I apologize, there's more than 7 questions. It's because I didn't include the closer and also the question you're asked the candidates. So there's actually 10. So
Now I'm not confused.
now we're on the same page, sorry. So this is the document right here that I'm calling the structured questions. Mayor, I would recommend that you ask the first question, which I'm calling an opener
Okay.
question.
All right.
And then we can decide who wants to ask the other questions here. There is, for question number 4, just to give you an understanding of what those are, these are not required or in any way, designed that you have to ask A through C. These are suggested follow-up questions to get to some details of the initial question you ask, if it's of interest to you or other council members. The same for question number 6. Once we get to question number 9, what questions do you have for us is the question you'll be posing to the candidate, and then the closer question is really what would they like to share, if there's anything additional, basically their closing statement.
Mr. Mayor.
And
The second page.
I think we reserve the right to ask anything that we want as far as in addition to.
Which kind of leads to my question, are we on a time constraint per candidate?
So we have an hour, but now that there's a candidate that is not here, we have a little bit more time. This is your time, so however long you need to take. I think an hour and 15 minutes would make sense. I think that there shouldn't be any reason why you probably need to go more than that. I think if you could keep in mind, we have about 5 minutes that's for the candidate to respond, as well as you to ask follow-up questions, and then typically moving on. So it's really up to you if you want me to be reminding you that it's time to move forward. I'm happy to do that.
Please.
Yes, okay. And then it's up to you if you want to move on, if you feel it's a good, if you feel you have more questions you want to ask and the council has more questions they want to ask, then we'll respect that and move forward, or we can move on to the next question.
Yeah, we reserve the right to ask a question and move on if we want to.
Yeah.
Is that fair?
The second document you have here were
Yes.
other questions that came forward either from us as suggested questions or from you. Some of you may not have seen the questions in blue because they came to me after I met with you, so that's why they're highlighted in blue. So I just wanted to let you know that some of you may not have seen those questions that came to me from other council members. So these are questions you might want to use as follow-up questions, additional questions, just things that came up. So I wanted to make sure you had those in front of you as well.
So we don't have to tell the person to take less time if they want to answer a question.
Yeah, I always recommend to my candidates, and they've heard this before, 3 minutes is a long monologue, and you want to make sure you don't lose your audience. So they should be responding within 2 to 3 minutes, and I'll remind them of that as well.
All right, thank you.
Okay, and now we have to decide who's going to ask what questions. So Mayor, I recommend that you ask the first question.
Okay.
How would you like to move forward from there? Would you like to hand out the questions? Would you like people to volunteer to ask certain questions?
I would like to have volunteers going from there to there, or there to there, whichever you'd like.
Yeah, I was thinking, Mayor, you do the first and last question. I can do 2 and 3,
Okay.
4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. Or, right? Or, yeah.
You're 6, 7, if that goes the way.
That way everyone gets 2 questions. Make it easy.
And so who had 6 and 7?
That would be Walton.
Okay. And that means Jorgensen has 8 and 9?
Yes,
Okay.
Does that work with everybody?
it just happened.
Any other questions from council?
Everybody comfortable with that?
Yeah.
So, so if we have any questions ourselves, we ask at the end. Sorry.
So there's a couple of different times you can ask questions.
Okay.
If it's coming up for you because how I responded to a question if I was a candidate, and you're like, I wonder what they meant by that, or I'd like to know a little bit more than that. That's what I mean by a follow-up question.
Okay.
It's better to ask it, then just say, I have a follow-up question to your response to that question. You could also be writing some things down, and then wait till the end and say, I have a few questions that came up for me that I'd like to know a little bit more about. So there's, towards the end or after, as a follow-up question to their responses, either or.
All right, perfect.
Okay.
Thank you.
And in the answer, some of those additional questions probably will be answered as they go along. So
I
we
think
don't
so.
need to actually ask a question if it's already been answered in the monologue, as you say.
And then just as a final conclusion, what I'm hoping for at the end of these two interviews is that we have a candidate. I'll be looking to you to give me your feedback in this public meeting on your recommendation on who you'd like to move forward with for a conditional offer, which of course we would be doing a background and reference check on them. So it would not be determined today who you'd be hiring, but making a decision on a candidate you'd like to move forward with is the hopeful outcome today.
All right,
Okay, thank you.
appreciate it. Thank you. So with that said, we probably ought to invite somebody in. He was being so quiet. All right. So if you want to take your place right there. So, Mr. Thomas, good.
Is it all right to have questions in front of the candidate?
Oh, yeah.
That would be very helpful.
There's 2 pages there. And these are potential follow-up questions.
All right, thank you.
So, Mr. Thomas, we're grateful to have you here. I get the privilege of asking the first question. You could read it, but I'm going to read it. Please share your background and experience that helps us identify you as the ideal candidate, and please also share why you want to be the next city manager of the city of Boulder City. And do you have any local knowledge of greater Las Vegas area and its politics?
Sorry. Do we get an opportunity just to get an overview of them? Oh, sorry.
So that,
I just meant, yeah, I just wanted.
please share your
we just-
background and experiences.
Yeah.
Okay, go.
Great, thank you, Mayor Hardy and members of the council. A pleasure to be with you today. It's been a full morning here in Boulder City, both starting off with a tour of the city with their former parks director, who was very knowledgeable about the city. I've been to the top of Bootleg Hill, Bootleg Canyon, and then all the way down to the other end of the city and back, and then a very nice meet and greet with members of the community, and then lunch with your executive team and the directors. I really do appreciate it. I learned many things about Boulder City today that I didn't know. So my name is Ned Thomas. I have owned a home here in Southern Nevada for 20 years. First in North Las Vegas, and then more recently in Henderson, as one of the callers noted. My 4 children have all attended Foothill High School just over the hill here. You probably go by it every time you come over to Boulder City from the Las Vegas area. All three of them have graduated, and my youngest daughter is now a senior at Foothill. My wife is also this year a full-time Spanish teacher at Foothill High School. So I have kind of a unique situation in my live-work area. My home is here in Henderson. Again, we've owned the home here in Southern Nevada for 20 years, but several years ago we had, for a variety of reasons, we had made the decision to move to the Bay Area. I had an opportunity to work over there, so it was during the recession, so our home was our mortgage was underwater. We chose not to walk away from that. We rented our home and we moved over there. Part of that, on a personal level, was because we thought there would be more educational opportunities for our children in that area, and we just, like many people, we thought, well, maybe the grass is greener over on the other side. We were in the Bay Area for about 4 years. I'll talk a moment about some of the cities that I worked for over there, as well as the cities I worked here in Southern Nevada. But it was, for a variety of personal and professional reasons. We ended up moving our family back to our home in North Las Vegas, and then we subsequently downsized and moved to Henderson. I currently serve as the city manager in Milpitas, which is a city of just over 81,000 residents. It's a full-service city. We have our own police and fire department. We have our own utility services. We manage and operate 30 different parks and recreation facilities. Some of them are, very similar to the facilities that you have here in Boulder City. We have a budget of just under $250 million and around 425 employees and about 150 more part-time employees for our summer programs. So just to give you an idea of the type of the city and the work that I'm currently doing. Now, I've worked for the city of Milpitas for 6.5 years. I was originally hired as the planning director there, managed the planning department, and then last year, the city manager at the time, the council chose not to extend his contract. And when the contract expired, they asked me, as the planning director, to move into the city manager's position. One of the things, I've learned many things, but one of the things I learned is that being a planning director, a community development director, and having 20 years at the time of experience in the public sector prepares you very well to be a city manager. And I think I've done very well in the job, even though I had never been a city manager before. Certainly worked with a number of excellent city managers in both North Las Vegas and in Henderson, as well as some of the other communities where I've worked. As the city manager, just a few of the many things that we have done. Just had my first review with the city council, and that went very well. They were pleased with the work that I've done in reorganizing some of the departments in the city for efficiency as well as cost savings. I work with a 10-member, I work with 10 department directors and then several other senior Office of Housing, Office of Building, Office of Economic Development on an executive team. We've presented a balanced budget to our council and also just in the past year have navigated the negotiations for 4 of our 5 labor unions, including the police and the fire. Our 5th labor union is scheduled to have their labor negotiations start in January. So that has been definitely a learning experience for me, and it's been we've come out the other end very well for both the city and for those bargaining units. The firefighters contract was just adopted or approved by our city council on Tuesday. So we're very happy with that. One of the other things that I was a good accomplishment is in the recent election, our city, we had a local sales tax measure that brings in about $7 million per year to help us bridge a gap in our budget. And that local sales tax measure was passed with over 80% support. And our current mayor and vice mayor were both reelected. So I told them, as your city manager is standing back and looking at that, it tells me that the majority of the residents are pleased with the direction that the city is going, that the choices that you have made in all of the decisions that you make at the dais, but also in selecting me as your city manager. When I moved into the city manager's position, having worked there for a number of years, the mayor and the vice mayor told me we're selecting you because you're a person of integrity and we know that you know the city well and that you will hit the ground running. And that's what I tried to do. And probably in some of the subsequent questions, I'll share some details on what that means. I very much enjoyed doing that, but part of all of my success really is I have a very good assistant city manager and a very good executive team that I work with, and I've been able to develop very good relations with each of my council members and in helping them in the decisions that they make. Just to sum up really quickly, I, again, have more than 25 years of experience in local government and public administration. I worked, 10 of those years were here in Southern Nevada. I worked first in the planning. I have a background in urban planning, so I was a planner for the city of North Las Vegas. And then I subsequently moved over and I worked for 5 years at the city of Henderson. Now in North Las Vegas, I was on current planning, so I was doing the permitting and the zoning and the development, working with the developers. It was at the time when the city was one of the fastest growing cities in the country, so a tremendous amount of work, and I learned a great deal. In Henderson, I was on the long-range planning side, helping with the development of their new comprehensive plan, but I was primarily responsible for their sustainability programs, coordinating and promoting those. Formed an interdepartmental working group. I worked with directors and staff. Some of the things we worked on had to do with energy and water conservation, promoting renewable energy, and then we also implemented the first citywide single-stream recycling program, working directly with Republic Services, and that was all in the city of Henderson. In between North Las Vegas and Henderson, I worked for a very short time in the private sector for an engineering firm in Las Vegas, in Summerlin. And unfortunately, that was during the Great Recession, and that firm subsequently closed. Shortly before they closed, I was able to move over to Henderson. During that time, I was in the private sector, though I served as an appointed member of the North Las Vegas Planning Commission, appointed by the mayor at the time, and that was a great experience as well. I have a master's degree in urban planning from the Graduate School of Design at Harvard University. After I graduated, I spent a year in Japan with my family studying urban and regional planning in a Japanese context. That was very interesting. A lot of lessons learned there. And I've also been a member of the American Institute of Certified Planners, which is a professional organization, since 2005. Lastly, I guess your other question, why Boulder City? I love, we've made Southern Nevada our home. Love living here in Southern Nevada. It's not ideal to commute back and forth. That's not the only reason that I would look at Boulder City. I'm very happy in the position that I'm in Milpitas, but this type of an opportunity does not come along very often. As I look to the future, I will probably have not more than 10 years left in my career, and I would like to have that in a community where I can continue to make a difference and make things better. I grew up in a small town, much smaller than Boulder City, about 2,500 residents. So even though I've lived in large cities and small cities, and I've worked for large and small organizations, I particularly like working in small towns because there is a sense of community. And to me, sense of community means that when you have an event or something that's coming up, that people are willing to pitch in. There's a spirit of volunteerism here. I certainly heard that and saw that today as we were touring Boulder City. Thank you. And as we went around, I saw a lot of I see things through a city manager's eyes now, and I see a lot of good things that are happening here in Boulder City. In preparation for the meeting today, I watched some of the videos of the council meetings to see how you're working together on the dais, and I was very happy to see it. I thought these are the type of people that would be very good to work with. So those are just a few of the reasons that I would consider moving here as a city manager.
Any follow-up questions from council with regards to his response to your first question?
So I know that it was mentioned in public comment, but we do have that you would move here to Boulder City. That's not a very big move for you, but it is a big move.
Yeah.
So how does that look for you?
Yeah, it's something that I've had many conversations with my wife about that. We were living in North Las Vegas. We like our home in Henderson, but we recognize that that's a need, is a requirement of this job. I have learned, having moved many, many times back and forth, that it will be a lot easier to move here than it was to move to the Bay Area. So short length moves are much easier. No, we would be happy to do that. Again, this would be, I would look at this as being the final job of my career, and so that it would, Boulder City is a very pleasant community. It's safe, and because our youngest daughter is graduating from high school, it's a juncture for us when it would be an appropriate time for us to consider that type of a move.
And I think you and I might have talked about this, Neb, but I think it's finding the right house. I think might be the delay is finding housing.
Well, yeah, for anyone, yeah.
Yeah,
So the
for
timing
anybody.
of that is something we would need to discuss.
Yeah.
I know in your charter it requires that upon hire that I need to live here. I've commuted for 8 years. If I need to have a residence here, then I can be here while we're selling our house. And I don't know exactly what the mechanics of that would
Yeah,
look
and
like.
that came up for all the candidates. It's just the housing, just finding the right time in the house. Yeah.
Yeah, I got a follow-up question. You had mentioned Milpitas was a full-service city. So are we with our, power, sewer, golf courses, water? Would you consider yourself an expert in any of those areas? And then what areas would you have growth in?
That's a very good question. One of the things that I very much enjoyed as being the city manager, I've been able to grow professionally, but also learn a lot about, I thought I knew a lot about city operations before I moved in the city manager's office. I don't consider myself an expert, certainly in running an airport or a golf course. Haven't ever had those opportunities before, but I do have a tremendous amount of experience working with public works folks, particularly working in land development, since that's the area that I come from. I do consider myself and have, I guess, presented myself as an expert in land use planning and zoning and urban design. I've been invited a number of times to make presentations at professional conferences, both here in Las Vegas and in Chicago and other areas through the American Planning Association and the California Planning Association, actually in Reno, of all places, as part of the Nevada Planning Association. One of the projects that I worked on in North Las Vegas was a transit-oriented land use plan for the North Fifth Street corridor, and that was working directly with our transportation engineers. So each project that I've had has taught me something about land use and development. Also, working in the private sector for the engineering firm taught me a great deal about bridge design and working with different regional and state agencies, both for good and bad.
Any other follow-up questions? Okay, we're going to move on to question number 2.
If we did an internet search on you, what would we find? And how would you respond to any of those concerns?
Oh, that's a very interesting question. It came up during our lunch with the department directors as well. Thankfully, much of what you will find will be our articles written about my work as a city manager and as a community development director, planning director in Milpitas and elsewhere. Generally, those stories have been very positive. The more recent ones that have been done by our local newspaper in Milpitas have been overwhelmingly positive. They talked about, some of the reasons why the council would have moved me into the city manager's office. Some of the goals and the objectives that I had in the city manager, and restoring some stability to the city, building trust, expressing appreciation to the employees. When prior to working in Milpitas, I also worked for the city of San Jose and their planning department. I was a division manager over both environmental planning as well as the development review team and the permit center and the permit counter. San Jose is a very large city, so not much was written about me before then. I think I was able to fly under the radar screen. I can't think of any. There might have been a project here, a project there that were written about. Prior to that, I worked in the town of Windsor, which was in Sonoma County. Windsor is very similar to Milpitas, very similar to Boulder City as I was looking at size-wise. We'd say 25,000 residents and a little bit of an economy geared toward tourism. I did very well in that community. The early items that were written about me were very positive. However, my job there ended rather abruptly. I honestly do not know the reason that it ended. Perhaps a personality conflict with the town manager. So that was written about in the paper, but please do read that article. The reporter did a very good job. He spoke to the council members and spoke to the planning commission and to the developers I worked with, and they all spoke very positively about the work that I had done. I'd like to say the work that I did speaks for itself. To this day, I honestly don't know why the city manager or the town manager chose to do what she did, but we just move on, and things actually worked out as they usually do for the better. And I moved on to San Jose and then elsewhere. You'll find a few stories from Henderson and from Las Vegas as we were implementing the recycling program in Henderson. I think that got some press. Some of the other work that we did with, I don't know if my name was mentioned particularly, but I did a lot of work on a regional level with my counterparts in Las Vegas, the Southern Nevada Water Authority, Southwest Gas, NV Energy. We created a local public-private partnership, a nonprofit. Also worked with MGM and Caesars, and and it was all around promoting sustainability in Southern Nevada, and we did, and also worked with the Desert Research Institute. So there's a lot of good work that was done there. Again, I don't know that my name was particularly attached to that, but it may have been. The last thing I'll say is, when I was, and I might have been mentioned when I was serving on the Planning Commission North Las Vegas too. In 2009, I did run for mayor in North Las Vegas. It was kind of, we had several incumbents that were running. I did fairly well in those neighborhoods where I was able to spend the money and get my name out there, but I was significantly less funded than the other candidates. We'll just put it that way. It was wonderful overall, and I can say this now from a perspective. It was a very difficult time, but it taught me a lot about how you serve and what you have to go through to get elected. So those would be some of the other stories that you might find.
Any follow-up questions? Okay. Question number 3.
This-
I'm sorry. I thought I was supposed to do it. I'm 4 and 5, sorry.
You're good. This position will oversee and have accountability of $103 million budget and 350 plus staff members while managing a complex public sector agency. Please share your background with budget and financial oversight and experience generating creative funding streams. Additionally, what have you learned thus far about the city's budget, income sources, and funding needs?
Yeah. Thank you. Again, I have more than 25 years of experience in the in local government and public administration. So as the city manager, I'm absolutely responsible for delivering the budget, a balanced budget to my council. The transmittal letter that's on there has my name on it. Obviously worked very closely with our finance department, finance director, and all of the directors in developing that budget. As I mentioned in my opening comments, our budget in Milpitas is just under $249.8 million, and we have 455 FTEs. The current positions that are filled are around 425 employees. So I'm very familiar with putting together a budget and managing the budgeting process for a very complex organization. And we can talk more about the details of what that process looks like if we want to, but in a matter of time, even without being the city manager responsible for the budget, in all of the time that I've worked with in local government, I have either been preparing my budget on a departmental level or managing budgets for particular projects. Some of them have been very large. The project I mentioned in North Las Vegas, I think $250,000, $300,000 project. In Milpitas, as the planning director, we were able to get grant $1.3 million, then $1.6 million in grant funding to put together a program. It's a local app-based transit program within the city of Milpitas, and all of that was grant funded. But all of that has budgets and accountability and metrics that are attached to it. So I just mentioned that because at the overall city level budget have that type of experience, as well as down in the trenches and the local, the project-based budgets. I was going to mention too, when I look over at budgets, some of my first experiences I had is when I was the liaison for both staff liaison for both North Las Vegas and Henderson to the Southern Nevada Regional Planning Coalition, the SNRPC. And for a time I chaired the Regional Sustainability Working Group there, also helped that group put together their annual budget to present to each of the cities. So again, just as some examples of some of the budgeting work that I've done, but in addition, it's certainly been one of the growth areas, maybe one of I'll admit, the largest growth area that I've had as city manager in putting together the budget for our council. And I was very pleased because the budget process has not always been smooth in Milpitas in past years. Last year, which was the first year that I was responsible for it, it went very smoothly, and the budget was passed within the timeline that was given.
Did you have any follow-up questions to that?
Yes.
Okay.
Could you elaborate, please, on what you know about Boulder City's budget, income sources, and any funding needs or creative ideas that might have come to you in studying or learning about that?
Yeah. Well, it's it was pleasing to see that the Boulder City budget is, the city of Boulder City is very well funded. And you can see that as you drive around, and that your parks are well maintained and your streets are well maintained and things look very nice. I also noticed that in your election, you had passed your, not a bond, the measure or the approval, the community's approval for the $9 million for your additional funding for your pool project. And it was very interesting in that project to see how the funding was put together, because it's coming from so many different sources. And then, of course, for Boulder City, I was also, in preparation for the interview today, I wanted to see, I knew that the solar leases played a big role here. I had no idea how big of a role that they played here in providing 33 to almost 40%, not 40, quite 40%, 33 to 35% of your budget. I think that has been, what a creative way, going back years, that the city has found to fund its, to bring in revenue and to fund its operations. It does make me a little nervous, I'll be really honest, to see that 30% of your budget comes from one source. So I think that there might be some area of diversification in there. And talking to your current acting city manager, it sounds like might be some ways with battery storage and those sorts of things too. It's taking a resource and making it's literally making lemonade out of lemons, because you've got this great resource that's sitting there and you're making it into something that's very usable and helps keep the city functioning. It was very interesting to me too that budget-wise that Boulder City has such a low property tax rate. Most cities, the property tax is their primary source of revenue, and most finance directors or city managers will tell you, well, that's a good thing, because property values are, most of the time, property values are very stable, and they're much more stable than, say, sales tax. I guess if there was one area where every city looks to increase its revenue, generate more revenues through sales tax and through economic development. And some of the things that I've read about Boulder City, there may be an opportunity in your business area and working with your businesses and in bringing additional revenue that way to the city.
Any other questions on that question? Philip?
I don't have a follow-up, but I don't want it to slip my mind for later.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you share a specific example of initiatives or projects that you've led at Milpitas or any other cities about enhancing ADA compliance and accessibility?
Yeah, I had a really great conversation with some of the residents who are here around this topic during the meet and greet. ADA has been around for a while. It's usually it is under the purview of the building department, and then for public facilities, a lot of it is under the Public Works Department. That can be a starting point, and a lot of the ADA requirements are based on physical impairment. So in reading a little bit, because I anticipate that question would come in reading a little bit about some of this topic in Boulder City, I see that the residents are much more interested in a more expansive view of ADA, and expansive in terms of what those improvements would look like, as well as not just for the residents who may have physical, mental, emotional disabilities, but also the people that are caring for them, and what does that look like? So I think that the ADA requirements themselves can become a base for that. But and this is my planner background coming into play, if you have a group of residents that are really interested and passionate about that, which you do, and then you can somehow pair them with the technical expertise and the knowledge of building and infrastructure and then add the finance people into what the city can afford, that can become a very powerful way of addressing this issue in a unique way for Boulder City. I know Boulder City likes to talk about its unique history, its unique small town flavor. Well, this could be part of that. Boulder City may become known as a very unique city for the compassionate way in which it has retrofit certain facilities for disability people with disabilities. And like most things, there's probably low-hanging fruit there, and I use the terms from your strategic plan. You would have the short-term, the medium-term, and the long-term things that need to be done. And you can start with the city facilities, and the city being an example of how you would like even the private sector to follow along with how they might implement those improvements for people with disabilities.
Okay, Councilmember Booth.
Please share your experience establishing and maintaining a culture of excellence for past local government agencies. Possible follow-up questions: how do you transfer or apply a culture of excellence in Boulder City? What did you do to ensure that your leadership team was held accountable for customer service or of excellence? And what tools did you use to plan and measure success? The hold employees accountable. Describe your experience in building functional teams. What obstacles have you had to overcome? What strategies have been helpful?
Thank you for the question. I'm going to use as an example of this, and I'll try to be brief, although there's many things to be said, my work on the City of Henderson's sustainability program. It was eventually given, we branded it, it was called the Our Henderson. Our community, our responsibility was the tagline. And that's jumping ahead a little bit, because all of that came much later on. When I was handed this project to do, and this goes to building a functional team, the city said, oh, we have all these wonderful things that we're doing related to sustainability with energy savings. At the time, the city was doing a performance contract to change out all of the streetlights, for example, and then the savings from the energy was going to be used to pay for replacement of boilers and chillers, and there was this, the city contracted with a firm to come in and do all of this, and it was an enormous program. A lot of money was spent on it, and it was really great for the city, and it was the city setting an example for sustainability. Well, all of that's happening behind the scenes, and nobody knows that that's happening. So the task was, please let everybody know what we're doing. We're working with the Southern Nevada Water Authority on removing ornamental grass from the parks and the golf course and that sort of thing. We were saving a lot of money by doing that and a lot of water. Well, let's tell the story of what that is. So we started out with a very simple proposition about please promote the city's efforts to be more sustainable. And then, and that grew into, as I mentioned earlier, recycling and renewable energy, solar panels on the roofs of city facilities and hybrid vehicles for the city's fleet and those sorts of things. So we started out, we're going to make this little pamphlet. But then we realized that there was so much more going on that, little old me in the planning department, and then suddenly working with staff in the engineering department and in the Parks and Rec department, particularly in the Public Works department. And I'll say early on, there was a little bit of hesitancy to do that, because why is the planning department trying to take credit for all of the things that we're doing? And so there was a hill to, a little bit of a barrier to get over there. But once we came together as a functional team and we realized, this is really great and it's going to help all of us, then we eventually settled on, coming from the planning department, let's do a strategic plan for sustainability. And we borrowed from here and there, as cities will often do, and we found a framework that worked for us, and we had 7 different areas, and then we had 3 different strategies. It looks very similar, it's typical strategic planning, so it looks very similar to your strategic plan. And we put all of that together, and we brought it to the council, and the council, they actually formed for a short time, or they gave the charge to the Citizens Advisory Committee. We want you to focus in on sustainability too. And so it became this much bigger thing. And it was because the team came together, it was very functional. And then we actually created a framework for that too, not just policy framework, but we had this staff level working together. And I said, we need some direction. So we formed a steering committee that was the department directors from the key departments that were related. And then we also had, at the time, Deborah March was a council member and then became mayor, and she was our champion on the council for sustainability. And all of that is, I put that as an example of a culture of excellence, because this was something that the city was doing that was excellent. It was considered a leader in sustainability. And in of all places, the Las Vegas Valley, and you're outside this valley, people say, oh, Las Vegas is all excess and all this stuff. And I said, no, we're one of the most sustainable areas in the country. And then we built on that because other cities were doing similar things. City of Las Vegas was, City of North Las Vegas. And so we began to work together through the SNRPC and other ways to promote sustainability in Southern Nevada. And so it's excellence in the organization, excellence in the team, but it was real. I think of that, and I'll look back, on my career, and I'll think of that very fondly because it was such a time when everyone was focused and working together on a particular goal and topic.
Thank you. Councilmember Booth, I know there was a lot of suggested follow-up questions there as well. Did you have any other questions there?
Go ahead.
Councilmember Walton?
Okay. I'm going to, so if you want to follow along, and letter B under the follow-up, but I'm not going to give the whole thing. I'm
Okay,
going
I
to
can
kind
just
of
read it here.
paraphrase that, right? So give us an example, and maybe relative to your current position, so that we can translate that over to how that might look here in Boulder City. So the question is, how would you hold your team accountable to customer service excellence, and what tools would you use or have you used to measure success in holding your team accountable?
I think the success that we've had in Milpitas, and this would apply to any community, including Boulder City, is having that happen is hiring the right people, or if you would inherit people, then creating, providing a clear vision of where you want to go, and then finding a way for them to, or providing the framework for them to follow. Where I'm going with that is that in Milpitas, shortly before I became the city manager, we had hired a new public works director, and he came in, and we had several interesting conversations around, and his approach to things was white glove service. And so white glove service became, that we usually associate that with a 5-star hotel or something, but he applied that to his public works team, and we began using that more as a not a mantra, but more of an approach to how we were going to do our work in Milpitas. And the way that came down then is, we talked about it. I have a weekly meeting with my executive team. We talked about how do we want to do service. We've had a couple of leadership. I don't like the word retreat. We've had a couple of leadership training workshops. And we've really talked about how we want to work together as a team, and then how we're going to share that and hold our staff, our respective staffs, to a higher standard, and that higher standard always being white glove service. So that's the first thing that pops into, even as a city manager, that's the first thing that pops into my mind when I get the phone call, 2 or 3 during the week, as I usually do, with some type of a complaint, whether it's water bill or the access to the sports fields or whatever it may be. It's like, and it's just a mindset of how you're going to approach the work that you're doing. At the end of the day, cities are always service delivery organizations. So we can talk a lot about customer service and what does that look like. I think that paradigm of white glove service is very helpful, and that has to go, again, in my case, it came from the top down. We're still in the process of embedding that into everyone at the city, from the clerks at the front counter to the maintenance workers who are out pulling the weeds. But they know that we have set the standard, that's what we're trying to achieve. I'll just leave it with that.
So, did you have any employees that could not give the white glove treatment, and how did you handle those employees?
That's always we have had employees at various levels where both at the manager level as well as the lower level, where it wasn't working out. Some of them have chosen to go elsewhere. Some of them have been invited to go elsewhere, because it's very important that everyone is moving in the right direction, and that now that we have set the standard, then it's it's part of their job to get in line with that. We do provide, I mentioned that we're doing the leadership training workshops with the executive team. Many of the directors have taken some of the principles that we've learned in our sessions that we've had, and they're now working with their team. And so that's another way that we're pushing it down. We try to get the message down to everyone. Unfortunately, sometimes if it doesn't work, then it's sort of like this is the direction the city is now going in, and if you want to be with this city, this is the way you need to also get in line with this. But we'll definitely work with, you'll notice in my assessment that I'm very relational. So we always want to work with someone to help them to get with the program.
Okay, question number 5, Councilmember.
Describe a situation where you managed a difficult employee who wasn't meeting expectations despite attempts to address the issue. How did you handle the challenge and what was the outcome? Please also describe what you have done to inspire a top performer.
Yeah, this is also a very interesting question. Someone who's worked in municipal government for a long time, you're always going to run into an employer who's not meeting expectations. I dealt with this very issue recently, and the way that we've handled it, I don't want to divulge confidences. So what I have done in this case is to work very closely with my assistant city manager as kind of a counselor to me, meaning that I might have an idea of how, or something is difficult for me, then I will talk to him and we'll work through it. Obviously, if this involves an employee performance issue, then we're working with the HR department as well, our human resources department. Some of the things that we've done, of course, there's always progressive discipline, where if you have an underperforming employee, I think part of having integrity is having very frank we would say courageous conversations with people to let them know, here's the expectation, here's where you're falling short. We would like to help you to do better. What are your ideas for doing better? And then we will move forward with that. So unfortunately, in the case I'm talking about, that we had those conversations, but it wasn't necessarily getting any better. Then we start documenting things, and things will have to be documented in writing. We have to be very careful. In the public sector, of course, most of the employees are covered by union. We have to navigate that as well. And so for in the case that I'm sharing with you now, the outcome is not clear yet. Is the best that I can say. It's someone that I hope will come around and that they will, but I'm not seeing the improvement yet, so we're still working through. We're still working through that. But all the time, I'm trying to protect the myself, but I'm also trying to protect the organization by document everything. But all of the time, you'll see in my assessment, it's all about compassion as well. So, and that's always the difficulty in situations like this, where you have to balance the compassion versus holding people accountable. And then that's a very, as I've learned the hard way, that's a very tricky proposition. Now, with someone inspired as a top performer, I'll again use one of my examples from Henderson. I had a really great team over there, 4 planners that were working under me, and one was just a phenomenal, we call him a high potential, as we called him there. And I very much enjoyed working with her. Now, I'm very much subscribed to the idea of situational leadership. So I dealt with her much differently than I worked with another employee who wasn't doing as well. And then I had a couple that were in the middle. But my team has gone, that team has gone on to achieve great things. That particular person now, leads an entire division in the BLM in another state. And it's quite phenomenal. I feel very rewarded because it's nice to see her success. Another one of my team members has also moved to California, and he's an assistant city manager in the city where he works. So I would like to hope that I have had some hand in the success that they've had, and early in their careers in helping them to develop. But it was more about, as I talked about situational leadership, I didn't describe that very well, but it's really in giving them challenging assignments, and in some of the cases they were just able to handle that, and I didn't have to step in very much. So I think it's part of being a manager, is navigating that and understanding how much direction and how much coaching does that person need versus do they need very, very little, and then you just have to step in once in a while. But that's part of the skills that you gain in being a manager as you work over a number of years for different teams and with different people.
Any follow-up questions? Okay, Councilmember Walton.
Okay, Mr. Thomas, number 6. Share your experience working with elected officials and what your overall philosophy is working with a city council and ensuring that there are open lines of communication and regular interactions.
Great, thank you. Oh, I've worked with different councils in different cities over many, many years now. I think above all, it's always important to remember that you are the elected officials who have been elected by the residents to represent them. My job as city manager or any member of staff is to implement the policy direction that is given by the council. We're part of the operations. Now, and also to give the best recommendations that we can to the council. Some of my best experiences in local government have been working with the councils in the city of Henderson. They just have very highly, they've always had very good council members there. Coming from the planning side, a lot of those council members have worked their way through the planning commission, and so they understand, some of the best council members that I've worked with, they understand the role of the city council members, but they also understand some of the operational side as well, and so they're able to navigate that a little better. In my current role as city manager in Milpitas, I have 5 very different council members, and some of the ways that I communicate with them, I have regular meetings with the mayor. It might be 2 or 3 times a week, or it might be a phone call or a text. Some of the other council members less so. Whenever there's a very significant item on agenda, I will reach out to all of them to have a briefing, but most of the time I have 3 council members who have regular established briefings prior to council meetings. Sometimes if there's an item and I can't get a chance to meet with them face to face, I will send an email and give them give that council member a summary of what that item is and what some of the issues might be that they might want to consider. Shortly after I moved the city manager's office, I instituted a biweekly report. It continues to evolve over time, but this is a report, usually starts, it has all of the upcoming events in the city, and then I give a report from what has happened in each of our 12 city commissions, and then each of the departments and the department heads go in and they add this in every 2 weeks. What have they done? So the police chief will write about all the community engagement items they've had. The fire department will do the same. We have a table in there that tells about all the grants that the city has applied for and what the status is. We have another table that has all the development projects and what the status is on that. So that goes directly to the council. I also have information memos if there's a larger item that has a lot of detail that I need to share with the council, but it's not necessarily ready for a decision or something, then we'll put that in an information memo. A lot of times those are written by the department director, and it will go through, we'll call it a through memo, it'll go in a through memo to the council. Those are all public as well. It's been a little tricky because I'm back forth. I'm usually over here on the weekends, so my council knows that they can always reach me on the phone or by text, and they know that the assistant city manager is there in case there's an emergency or there's something that they need. Whenever there's a special event that's on a weekend, that I'm always over there to help them with that. Let me see. Yeah, and just there have been a couple of times when council members have, even this part of the question, but they've asked for things that that couldn't be done, or they needed to go to the full council. So I've established with them very early that, I'm willing to, well, they know that they will get back from me, whether or not it's something that we can do right away. Yeah, we'll take care of that white glove service to the council as well. Or is it, I'm very honest with them and okay, this needs to go to the full council. Please bring this back. We will, put that on the agenda, or you can bring it up during announcements. So overall, I think I've always had really good relations with the councils, but I think that the key there is to have regular briefings with them. And to me, it's fine with a call or a text, but there's nothing that will replace a face-to-face meeting, and we can get a lot of business done in those meetings.
Follow-up?
How familiar are you with open meeting law and kind of what you can do for us? Because obviously it might be a little different than California, what we can discuss, how we can discuss it, what kind of information you can give us individually versus collectively, and whether it has to be publicly known and can't just be private information given. I know you've worked in some of these other municipalities that would have those similar things, but how familiar are you with that?
Yeah, working with both, since the time that I worked in North Las Vegas at the Planning Commission, open meeting law applies to those meetings as well, and certainly with the council in Canada. I appreciate the question, because one of the very important things that I forgot to mention is that a cardinal rule for me is that all council members get treated the same by the city manager. And so if I'm not sharing information with one council member that I'm not sharing with the other. Now, if it's a conversation that I'm having with the council member and they ask me to keep it confidential, that they're not ready to divulge that yet, then coming from their direction, then I might keep that confidential, or I might ask them, oh, this is something that I think the other council members would be interested in. Will you do that? My emails that I sent out with the council, this is more of a technique thing, but it's more of a requirement, as emails that I send to the council are always blind copied to the council, because I don't want them this is more of a California rule, but I don't want them doing a reply all and then running into some type, there it's called the Brown Act, so a Brown Act violation. So I'm very cognizant of the rules that are around that. If there's ever any question, I would turn to the city attorney and work with her on those types of questions. But treat everybody the same, and any of the information that goes to one council member generally will go to all of the other council members as well.
Next question. Okay, number 7, Mr. Thomas. Share what you have learned thus far about Boulder City's form of government and its pros and cons.
Well, you have the typical council manager form of government. I will admit it's a little easier to manage with 5 council members rather than 7, or heaven forbid, the city of San Jose has 10 council members and a mayor. So there's a lot of work to be done. A very large city and a lot of work to be done. So council manager form of government. The council members, again, as I said, it's the elected body, represents the interests of the residents. I think here you're all elected at large. I don't think you're elected by district. So, and that has some advantages to it as well, because you're looking out for the benefit of the entire city. My job as the city manager then, in the simplest forms, is to marshal the staff and the resources of the city to accomplish the goals of the city council, or really of the community as expressed through the decisions made by the city council. One of the things that's exciting to me, this is more of an answer to one of the other questions, but that's very exciting. I became more excited about this whole idea of how would it be to be the city manager in Boulder City. Is your strategic plan? And I thought, a strategic plan. I've looked at many of the plans, but it's very straightforward and it's very elegant, really, even in the way that it's written, and it's really tightly written too. You've got all of the usual things, the goals, and the vision, and then the goals, and then the strategies. But then I was particularly interested that you have the metrics that are in it too. For me, that makes the city managers, it clarifies the city manager's job and makes it, it would make it much more easy, because you were all involved in that, the residents were involved in it, and at least for the next 4 years or 5 years, however long it's to take to implement that plan, you've already laid out the groundwork for that to happen. So one of the primary goals, or one of the primary responsibilities of the city manager, in addition to delivering a balanced budget to you, which is part of that strategic plan, is to implement that strategic plan and to work with your executive team to make sure that all the departments are working in that same direction. You're welcome.
Councilor Jorgensen.
Oh,
Maybe you're clairvoyant, because
I didn't notice it.
Question 8 says you have received the updated strategic plan for our city, and I think we can confirm that. What did you like? What questions do you have? And how would you ensure that we accomplish our priorities?
Well, and I'll wrap this into I didn't really cover pros and cons of form of government. I've worked in the council manager form of government for all of the 25 years, from North Las Vegas to now Milpitas, and that form of government seems to work well. I don't know what it would be like to work under a strong mayor form of government, although in a way the city of San Jose has, I believe their mayor and their 10 council members, that's their job, and so it is more of a strong mayor form of government. But I prefer having a city manager. I think it makes more sense. It makes your job more easy, and I think as I just mentioned, by having a plan already laid out, it makes the city manager's job more clear and a little more easy to implement. From your strategic plan, am I correct? I realize that one of the, and this is again because I come from a planning background, that while it's really great to have here's the strategic plan, this is what we've already decided that we're going to do. Unfortunately, if I were to become the city manager, I wasn't privy to all the conversations that went into that and all of the, I don't like the word sausage making. Sometimes policy making is sausage making, but all of those conversations that went into and the meetings that you had, and sometimes those can be kind of difficult conversations, but they're also, at the end of the day, when you come out with a really great strategic plan, that it's rather reassuring and it's very satisfying. I didn't have that opportunity, so to be part of those conversations. So I don't know if there's anything and I'm not particularly one council member, but is there anything it says there's questions I have, is there anything in that strategic plan that was particularly difficult to reach a conclusion or to get to a particular strategy? And then I'll follow up with that I noticed that you added a health component to that and community health, and why was that item added?
And just for clarification, we're still on question 8?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you have a question to answer your question, to get some more clarification.
Should I move on to 9? So
Well,
we can have a question.
Yeah, we possibly could move on to 9, which we could start with the questions. But
Right.
maybe before we did that, because I think there's one part of that question that I don't know that you really did cover, because you talked about it beforehand, which would be, how would you ensure that council accomplishes their goals and priorities?
Well, yeah, we'll stick to that, and we'll stick a pin in the questions
Yeah,
that I had around
that
that,
would
because
be great.
those will be my questions at the end, but that'll be better. Again, accomplishing the priorities, a lot of that has to do with the people that are working under me, and that's my job. That would be my job, is to marshal the resources and the staff of the city to implement the general plan. I'm going to be the champion of the strategic plan, but I'm not the one who's going, by and large, I won't be the one who's going to implement each of those items. And in fact, the column that I'll be responsible for the ones that say city manager in that column, that which department is responsible, but that's also part of the work that I do. In addition to meeting regularly with the council members, I'm also meeting regularly with the department heads and holding them accountable. And then I did notice that within the strategic plan, that there's a mechanism for the implementation that we report regularly back to the council on the progress that we're making. Certainly that would happen every year as part of the budget process and on an annual basis, but I believe the strategic plan calls for that on a quarterly basis. That way we're tracking that. And then I also like that the strategic plan had short-term, medium-term, and long-term items. So we'll begin now on all of the items, but we'll recognize that some of them are going to take longer. So that's laying the groundwork. The medium ones, we might talk about that and begin preparing for it, but then our primary focus is going to be on the short-term ones and getting those done, and then we'll roll through the other items. But, none of this is finite, like as a start and an end. And as an example, one of the items, one of the goals is for high-quality infrastructure, but the amenities for the community and for the visitors. And of course, the one that's front and center is the swimming pool that came up earlier, and that's one of the items in the strategic plans. Well, that's already underway. Thankfully, the residents supported the additional funds that will go toward that swimming pool. Otherwise, that would be a different conversation. Okay, well, now what do we do, and how do we get the money? Because that's now part of the strategic plan. So I just use that as one example of something that can get underway right away.
Okay. Any follow-up questions? Okay, guess we're on 9 then.
Okay, number 9.
No.
I'm not sure if you have any, but what questions do you have for the panel?
Okay, so now we'll get to the question about, so on your strategic plan, were there any of those items that were particularly controversial, or did this was a continuation of a previous plan, so maybe it was just, it was sort of adjusting it or adapting it to the current circumstances. But I did see that you added in a new item that was public health, and I was kind of wondering why public health was added in.
Just a couple thoughts on that. We have a community that is highly involved and very, very wise, very aware of, who they are, what excites them, what they need. So we involved them. So we had a couple community nights where they were able to put the things that were priorities for them. We have a mayor who is a physician by profession, or maybe politician, we're not sure. He's one of those, but
Some of the same letters.
that could be part of, yes, there he is. That could be part of the reason health was involved. Plus, we are an aging community in some ways, right? And plus, we went through a pandemic. So there were some thought processes that went into that. But you are right that there was a lot of conversation. There's a lot of personalities up here, even when it was council-driven. There were a lot of different areas that we thought about or were concerned about that we brought into it. So there is a variety of thumbprints on that plan that sits in front of you as the final plan.
I would have suspected that, but yeah, thanks for the confirmation. And then the other big question I guess I have is, and again, it's funny because it's 5 people, we could be here all day, but what do you see in your successful city manager? A lot of what you're looking for was included in the pamphlet, but when I moved upstairs, when I moved from the planning director's position upstairs to the city manager's job, I realized that suddenly realized that I was working in an entirely different environment. And these people, council members in particular, that I thought that I knew very well, I was suddenly working with them very closely and got to know them very well. And I realized that they had different expectations for me than I would have assumed. So I don't know if you have just a few expectations for your new city manager. And hopefully you would be patient in them growing into that role. I don't know if you have any thoughts on that.
never ask. So as I look at my role as the mayor, for instance, or the role of the council person, our role, 15,000 people, largest city in the state of Nevada, the only city that has a place for tortoise or species that are endangered, slow growth, emphasis on electricity and the budget including in that. So I look at our influence that we have in the greater Las Vegas Valley, and it's not based on population. It's based on relationships. So who do I know when I go down and I'm on a panel and I commit them to, as they encroach on El Dorado Valley, that it doesn't include residents or residencies that would be against what we as a community have wanted to preclude from coming marching down El Dorado Valley. So I get them to commit to what they've already committed not to do. And those relationships for representing 15,000 people versus 100 times that is important. That I can look people in the face and I can say, remember when you said, or, and I do it in such a way that they have to do what you just did, is shake their head yes. And for me, that's important that I work with the city of North Las Vegas, the city of Henderson, the city of Las Vegas, the county of Clark, and so that we, every one of us, have a seat at a table of a organization or a committee or a council that each of us sit on, and so we're important for every vote on every committee and every commission. So we want the city manager to be able to say, I am also wearing the hat of Boulder City, and I function on a regular basis with other city managers and with the Nevada League of Cities or with the Southern Nevada Regional Planning Coalition. Thank you for serving there. So that we look like we're not only engaged, but we're meaningful engaged, and they depend on us to do the things that we do in order to be able to have them do the things that they want to do. Without us, they can't build, and they have to periodically be reminded of that. So the city manager becomes a delegate to the greater world of Southern Nevada, and indeed to Nevada, to get us all on the same page, and so we don't pick on each other, and we solve challenges instead of make them. And so my role in small city of Boulder City is work with the people who are bigger than us, but appreciate what we do and how we're rational, reasonable, and we help them in their method of growing while we are helped by our method of not growing. We still like to be a smaller, greener, in every sense of the word, city, and so that's what we do. And to answer your question on health, we are aging community, so where do we put our seniors? We are losing our youth, and so our population is going down in the schools, and we are grateful for those kids who have a senior in high school at Foothills who then comes to Boulder City High School. Not to put any pressure on you.
Several of my neighbors come over here to the hill.
So we are dependent and yet independent and yet cooperative with the greater Las Vegas area. And our ability to sit at the same table everybody else does with an equal vote everybody else has is vital for our safety and our way of life. That's what you have to do.
Well said.
Would other council members like to comment to the question?
I contemplate, I'm going to be going on my second term, so just kind of what I've seen. Obviously, you would be a direct report for staff. We have a good culture here with our staff, I feel like, and valuable, many valuable people here that do many good things. And so important to me would be maintaining and encouraging positive, good relationships with white glove service would be nice too. But maintaining that. So I have a little bit of thought towards staff because this is a big change for them. And I loved what I heard about communication with council, because communication is key. You kind of go this way with staff, and then with council, we kind of go this way with you and staff and community. So there's that in between, and so for me, communication is huge too. So.
I don't want to stretch this out any longer than it already has been. However,
Well,
I'm going to defer on answering that, other than to say, I think you've already had a chance to internalize the questions we've asked. I think you'll get your answer in those questions. But I do want to do a follow-up. One of your first responsibilities, if hired as a city manager, will be to recruit and hire a deputy city manager. What type of candidate would you be looking for, and how do you envision potentially dividing responsibilities between the city manager and deputy city manager positions?
That's a great question. I depend so much now on my assistant city manager. I am only successful, we are successful together, I'll just put it that way. And it's because we didn't know each other before, even though we both came from the city of San Jose, we didn't know each other, but we complement each other. And so I would look, first and foremost, someone that complements my skills but has a similar personality to mine, a similar outlook to mine. He was a public works director, for the 10th largest city in the country, and then came over to Milpitas. And so he has tremendous, and worked for the large city in Parks and Recreation as well for over 25 years. So he has all of that background, which is very complementary to my background in land development. But it's been really interesting because as we've organized, one of the things I did was to reorganize the city manager's office. We went from 3 executives to 2 executives, and we realized that there was a lot of work for the 2 of us to how are we going to manage that. So we have organized ourselves in what we refer to as community service areas, and we have 4 of those. We have public safety community service areas, which is police and fire. We have a community services, it's a mouthful, a community service area, which is Parks and Recreation and our Public Works, and then I added IT in there. And then we have a leadership and strategic support, which is our internal departments, IT, HR, finance, and city attorney and the clerk. And then the last one is our, what did I leave out? Oh, community development CSA, which is planning, building, code enforcement, fire, safety, and land development. So it's really interesting because normally I would have gravitated toward the community development because that's my background, but he was interested in developing that for himself and housing, on the housing side as well as, so he oversees that CSA and meets with them regularly. So in addition to the meetings that we have with individual department heads, we also meet monthly as groups of those CSAs because there's so much overlap between the work that we do. I mean, planning and building and economic development are, practically, well, they're brothers and sisters. Peanut butter and jelly, we like to say. And the same with Public Works and Parks and Recreation because there's that natural, Parks and Recreation, community services, and social services, they don't have anything to do with parks maintenance and the sewer system, but there's some connection there because they're out in the community and it's community services and so on and so forth. So as the city manager, I felt that it was very important for the police chief and the fire chief to report to the city manager. The earlier city managers had done that differently, but I moved that back under me, so I oversee Public Safety CSA, and for now I oversee finance and HR, the administrative side, the leadership and strategic services, and that works very well. But so we're having all these different meetings and these different conversations, but then I meet with my assistant city manager on a weekly basis, and we talk through all the things that we've talked about, and then we give, we counsel with each other, and then we give the direction back. And if it's one of his directors, okay, well, can you tell the public director this? And so I personally am a collaborative person, and that's how I work best. If there's an issue that I have, I don't keep that bottled up inside, and so I need a person that's there to back me up and to compliment me there. If I'm upset about something or he is, then we are the other person that comes to. And I'd also look for someone who is my backup so that when I'm not available or I'm not here, that they're easily and able to step in and take on that responsibility. And that's how we have done it in the city where I am now, and that seems to have worked very well. I know that model is something that a previous city manager brought over from the city of San Jose. Just because there were so many departments there, that's how they were organized. And we've adapted that to Milpitas, and I would assume that working with whoever was hired as the deputy city manager, that we would adapt that to Boulder City. And if it doesn't, we would adapt it until it works well for us. But it's we talked earlier about communication with the council, but communication with the staff, that has worked very well for us.
Thank you.
And this is just really more of an open discussion at this point. Questions can come back from either side, get you a chance to get to know each other. Yes.
I wanted to ask the question, as a city manager, you'll be involved in negotiating. If you were to teach a class in negotiations, what would be the top 3 things that you would teach that class? What would be the top 3 most important things?
Oh, I'm going to have to reach clear back to my graduate school days when I had negotiation from one of the best negotiations teachers in the country, and it was very good. Some of the things that I've learned is that you have to be absolute. It's kind of what's up here. What's the truth? I could probably read down here. What's the truth? Be absolutely honest and have integrity, and don't. I know that negotiations are, some people will call it a game. I don't think it necessarily needs to be approached that way. There's certainly different sides, and you don't give everything away at once, and you're not like an open book. But you approach that in a way that you're trustworthy to the other side. You're, in other words, you're negotiating in good faith always, and that always has to be the starting point. The next part was we don't give everything away up front. No, be well prepared when you go in, not so that you know where you're going, but where you're going to start. And then the third one, maybe this is more important too, is listen. It's just active listening. I think listening is a very undervalued skill. And you think, oh, negotiations, I'm going to go in and do a lot of talking and we're going to do it back and forth. The more important skill there is listening and hearing what the other side says, and then not jumping too soon, but then taking back what you hear, processing that, and then coming back to the table to negotiate through the process.
Thank you.
Do you have any other questions for council?
I don't think so.
Okay.
I'm working in my mind on a closing statement.
Okay, well, I want to make sure that there's no other burning questions on council. Okay. Mayor, I'm going to give you the last question.
We've come to the close of our time together. This sounds so momentous. So please share your closing statement and anything else you think is important that we've not already discussed. This is open-ended. You can say whatever you want and what we want to know, and maybe share something about what we don't want to know, but it's important. So, but in your closing statement, you're probably going to say something about they may know that you're applying for this and Milpitas County is in mourning, and that's why all the black flags were out on the streets the other day.
Well, I don't know if I would go that far, but I would like you to know I very much, and for anyone who's listening out there, I very much like my job in Milpitas. It is a very difficult, it can be a very difficult place to work, and most people will recognize that. It's a great community, but my goals there have always been, from day one, to establish trust and build stability and express appreciation to the staff. And some of that reflects, just really quickly, and I've been talking enough, I don't need to blather on here, but just so you know, my philosophy toward my role as a city manager, I'd like to use the analogy of a three-legged stool, and maybe others use this as well, but I think it's very apt. The three legs of the stool are the council, the community, and the staff. And it's a difficult, city manager is a very difficult job because you're always balancing. It's not so much balancing, but you're bouncing back and forth between that. And sometimes the legs of the stool can be a little bit uneven, and part of the job is to re-even it again so that things are moving smoothly. As I've looked into this position, some of the things that have made a position, being the city manager in Boulder City, very attractive. Again, I watched the videos of your meetings and the way that you work together, and some of the decisions that you've made, and you've stated the reasons why you have done that. That has been very interesting and is very attractive to me, because I know that. And I know that I recognize now when I took the tour of the city that the decisions that you make are reflected in how the city looks. Like it's obviously a very well managed city. To Michael and to your previous city managers. I always tell people, I used to live in Henderson, or I used to work in Henderson. It's one of the best managed cities in Southern Nevada. Boulder City is a hidden gem, maybe not hidden to you because you live here, but for those who are on the outside, I have been pleasantly surprised. I thought I knew Boulder City well. We come over the hill to the 4th of July, breakfast and the parade and but it's so much more than that. And, I read your thing about the unique part of Boulder City and the history of Boulder City, and I knew all that, but I didn't realize, and your words are very well taken, I didn't realize how deeply embedded that was. And you mentioned about we're not dependent or independent, but really I didn't realize how much Boulder City is part of the fabric of Southern. It's not just that little town over the hill, but it's very much interdependent with those other communities. And it was brought home to me how unique this community is, because I've worked in those other cities that are really fast growing, and it was very development friendly. And it's like, what is this outlier? What is going on over in Boulder City? Why don't they want to grow? Well, I've had my eyes open. I understand that a little. I won't pretend to fully understand that like a native would, but I understand that a little bit better having gone through this process. The city that I work for now is also very development friendly. A couple of years ago, we had a new BART station, the regional transit station, open in our city, and so we've been building like gangbusters over there around this transit station. But at the same time, we have a very, even though it's become a large city, it still functions very much like a small town from my perspective. And we have this divide now between the old and the new, and it's really interesting. You don't have that here because you have the community, and you have this really, it's very unique, and I understand now why you want to preserve that and why it needs to be protected. If there was one change I would make to your strategic plan, I would insert the word authentic into you talk about your unique culture, or the unique sense of community here. It's really authenticity. This is an authentic small town in southern Nevada, and it's always been that way. I always said when I worked in Henderson, and if you've been over there in the last few years and seen the miracle on Water Street and how that has all turned around. When I was working there wasn't much going on Water Street. They have to call it the 20-year overnight success. But I always said someday this will, through my city planner eyes, someday this will be successful because it is an authentic Main Street, is an authentic downtown. And studies you'll look at it, that's what people are looking for now. So as you look toward the future of Boulder City, and as you have a large senior population, as you look to attract new residents here, the very thing that you have preserved here is what is going to attract new residents here, because people are looking for that. And from what I read, people are looking for that authenticity. So it's something to be protected, but it's a balancing act. So some of the conversations that we might have would be around how do you protect that while allowing a little bit of change to occur that is good development, but it's guided by the council and guided by the vision of the community, and it doesn't overwhelm what you're trying to protect. It's literally not killing the goose that laid the golden egg. And that sounds like a very exciting proposition to me. This will be my last job. With the caller who called in, he's going to be here 2 years. No, I'm not looking for that type of a job. If I come back to Southern Nevada, it's a commitment. To me, I'm perfectly fine over in California, and my wife can come over there after my daughter graduates. But if we were to move to Boulder City, not only would it be an easier move for us, but we want it to be the right move. And that there's some very interesting and exciting things that are very different than anything that I have experienced in my career. So that part is very exciting to me. And I'll just leave it at that. Thank you for the opportunity today.
Thank you.
I'm going to give council an opportunity to take a break. So we'll come back let me just take a look at at 2:55.
Oh, no, Mayor likes to do 12 and a half minutes.
Okay.
And then start like that. It's so exciting to see this. This is one of the programs that I worked with. I remember the day we came up with the Beyond to Nature. Yeah, and I saw that. And I thought,
Okay.
Are we live? No. Okay.
If I do it real loudly.
Gotta wait, Holly's the boss.
And the mayor really needs to call that. You ready, Tammy? Yes. Go on, Mayor.
Call City Council back to order and turn some time over.
Thank you, Mayor. We have our second candidate, Chris Jordan. I'm going to bring him up here.
Okay.
Are we gonna do the questions again?
Yeah.
Are we gonna do
Same
them in the
order.
same order? Okay.
Yeah, we can start that way instead of this
No,
way.
we're going same way. Don't mess it up.
We're going the same way?
Right.
Okay.
So the same questions.
I'm not going to read all the questions.
Okay, so what we're going to do, Mr. Jordan, is we have a list of questions and we have a list of the people who are going to ask the question. The good news is I start and finish and the other council people are in between, just to let you know. So good to have you here, Mr. Jordan, Chris Jordan, for those who are going to be watching. But please share with us your background, your experience that helps us identify you as the ideal candidate. And please also share why you want to be the next city manager of the city of Boulder City. And if you have any local knowledge of the greater Las Vegas area and its policies, that's okay too. So go for it.
Well,
Mr.
first,
Jordan.
good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for inviting me today. I really do appreciate it. Professionally, let me give you a little bit about my background. I was city manager for 15 years. I've been in government for 35 years. So for 5 years, the most recent position I held was city manager of Los Altos, California, which is a community of about 30,000 people in Santa Clara County in the Silicon Valley. I started there in 2016 and ended at the end of 2020. And I was hired initially as the interim city manager there, and there are two main reasons why the city council hired me and what they were looking for. They were looking for somebody who could improve the morale of the staff first. That was because my predecessor as a city manager did not get along very well with staff. Not that it was a horrible situation, but she tended to keep her door closed, didn't get around very much, didn't talk to everybody. And it got to the point, she made some decisions regarding policies that really upset the staff, to the extent that City Hall employees had not been in a union before. They actually unionized in her last year there. So that gives you a sense of the low level of morale in City Hall when I arrived. So part of my job was to try to improve morale, and I'll talk a little bit about how we can do that. The second thing was to get something done. The city had a huge reserve of funds at that point, but nobody was getting anything done. The streets were falling apart, the community assets, parks, facilities were not in good shape at all. They had just gone out for a bond measure several months earlier to build a new community center, because the old community center was 70 years old. It was an elementary school. The toilets were still built for 6-year-olds. And it had failed 70-30. So they had lost the trust. The council had sort of lost the trust of the community through that process. They still wanted to do a community center. They wanted to get things done. That's why they hired me. So I'm pleased to say that morale in City Hall improved, I think, tremendously during that time. And as we go through this, I can give you some examples why, but I won't hit all of it right now. But one of the key things was, for example, the new union. We never had any problems with negotiations. We got through things really quickly. I think they were very pleased with how things worked. And in terms of like building a new community center, that was under construction when I left, almost completed, for about $35 million. And when it came to in front of the Planning Commission and the City Council for approval, there wasn't one person who spoke in opposition of it. So after all of that, we managed to build community support for a project that literally 70% of the community didn't want before I arrived. So before I got to Los Altos, I was city manager of West Linn, Oregon, city of about 25,000 people outside of Portland. When I was hired there, West Linn is as politically volatile a community as you can possibly imagine, where they were actually electing new councils every 2 years. And in fact, when I arrived, all 5 new council members were brand new. They had basically kicked out the previous council, brought in a new city council. There had been a series of thefts at City Hall, credit card theft of about $150,000. And 6 months after I arrived, we uncovered a $1.5 million embezzlement from the former finance director. So my first job was just to rebuild the trust of the community with City Hall. And I'm pleased to say that after a few years, not only did we go back and do 3 years worth of audits that they were behind, but we fixed all of those problems. We built a finance department that was so good that we won the GFOA awards for budget, audit, and popular annual financial report. Won them all. On top of that, our finance department got so good that we actually contracted out our financial management team to other cities to manage their finance departments also. That's how much we rebuilt that organization. The other thing that we needed to do was we needed to build a new police station, which we accomplished. Had to pass a bond measure, and we did manage to do that. We built several new parks. But the key thing was rebuilding that community trust. I was there for 10 years, longest tenured city manager in the history of that community. Prior to West Lynn, I worked in the city of Lake Oswego, Oregon, which is another Portland suburb. I was the assistant city manager there for 5 years. I actually spent 6 months during that time as the interim city manager in Oregon City after they had fired their city manager. So that gives you an idea of kind of my background in local government. Before I got to Lake Oswego, I spent 10 years in the federal government, 9 of those at the Office of Management and Budget at the White House, and 1 year on Capitol Hill. So that's kind of my professional background. Personally, I'm married and have 3 children, and I'm really pleased to be here. Let me tell you a little about what I saw with Boulder City and why I applied for it and would like to be the next city manager here. First thing that attracted me, first of all, I don't apply for very many city manager jobs at this point in my life. I'm very choosy. I barely apply for anything. But this is a desert community. I live in Scottsdale now. My wife and I would like to continue to live in a desert community. So that was the first thing that was attractive to me about Boulder City. The second thing was the size of the community. I mean, I think that I'm not interested in I'm not one of these city managers who thinks bigger is better. I want something where there's a good community feel. And I think that was the key thing for me. I only want to work in cities that I want to live in. That's important to me, that have a shared sort of value system, that communities are supportive and helpful of each other. That's the kind of community I want to live in, where education is important, where public facilities is important, where the community looks at their government not as the problem, but as the solution. That's the kind of community I want to live in, and that's the kind of community I want to work for. So that's kind of what attracted me. Then I went through the brochure, saw looking at a pool project, things like that, all the kinds of things that I have done in the past and would be pleased to try to do again. So that's why I was looking at Boulder City.
The other part of that question, do you mind if I highlight?
Yeah.
The A part of that question, do you have any local knowledge of the greater Las Vegas area and its politics?
No, not particularly. No, I would come in as a fresh slate that all of you could educate and teach. And that was recorded.
Yeah, I do.
Councilmember Fox?
To kind of touch base on, you said, they brought you in, to boost morale and things like that. So, how did you motivate and lead a diverse team to, to build that morale?
Yeah, well, the key thing I think with all of these things, with something like that, and particularly with staff, is you have to build a culture of trust and support. And I know that sounds kind of vague and funny, but I'll give you the first example of it. First council meeting I was at in Los Altos. Now I was the interim city manager at that point. They brought me in as the interim, and then they went through a recruitment process and gave me the permanent job. First council meeting, a community member comes on up during it, somebody who I got to know quite well there and really had a good relationship with. But he kind of blasted staff a little bit and kind of blasted at the city a little bit and said, your staff is doing this wrong and that wrong and et cetera. And the council kind of didn't say anything, and it went on. And at the end of the meeting, here I am, the interim city manager, so I feel like I can say whatever I kind of want to, right? I mean, this is my opportunity. And so I kind of said to the council, I'm going to ask that in the future you not really allow that to happen, because we're trying to rebuild the morale of the staff here. And you, as a council, want to hire a new city manager. When those kinds of comments get in a newspaper, which they do, that's not going to help you any. That's going to look really bad. And so, and the council agreed. They said, yeah, you're right, we shouldn't do that. Staff needs to hear that. They need to hear that from their city manager. They need to know that they are supported by me as a city manager. So that's kind of the first step in building that trust. Everything is, I'm not one who calls people on the phone. I walk everywhere. I talk to everybody on staff all the time, get to know them a little bit. That helps build trust. The other thing, when I got to Los Altos, I asked each member of the city council, what is your relationship like with staff? And all of them said the same thing: we don't have one. And I asked the staff the same thing: we don't have one. I said, that's going to end. We're going to start having a good relationship between council and staff. You don't need to always work through me on everything. You can call department heads. You can have those conversations. Council knows they're not supposed to be giving policy direction and stuff to anybody other than to me. But beyond that, have those conversations. Ask those questions. On top of that, every holiday season, I would host a party at my house for council, key staff members, et cetera, to have just open conversations, not work-related, get to know each other. The more you get to know each other, the better you trust each other. All those things filter down throughout the entire organization. Another thing that I did, both in Westland and in Los Altos, was we would have a once-a-month brown bag lunch that everybody can come to. It's voluntary. You can come on, staff can come on in. We pick a topic. Sometimes we have somebody on staff do a little presentation on the topic. Maybe someone's going to be coming to the city council. This gives the staff a chance to kind of try it on out, present, get used to public speaking. I'm always there. There's always a time where you can ask the city manager anything you want. And so the staff can ask me whatever's going on that they want to hear about, and I'll tell them. That builds that trusting relationship. That helps build that morale. Those are the kinds of things that we do. We did a barbecue at the beginning of every fiscal year, and me and some of the department directors would cook the barbecue, and we would give it to, and we would have council members come on in and serve the staff, things like that. All those kinds of things help build that relationship, help improve that morale, and create this culture of support and trust that people want to be a part of, and they want to achieve in that kind of culture. Yeah.
So if we did an internet search on you, what would we find and how would you respond to those concerns?
If you did an internet search, or did you already do one? You will find stuff on me. I'm a city manager. I've worked in cities that were extremely challenging. As somebody told me after my Los Altos job, your only problem is that you took the jobs that nobody else would take, because I was willing to take on challenges. And so you're going to find things. So let me tell you, one of the key things that you will find, probably the first thing you'd see, is that I was offered the city manager position in South Pasadena in 2021, and then they withdrew the offer. And that made headlines. They did it without talking to me. They just withdrew it, which was disappointing. The reason why they did was they had received some emails going all the way back to my West Lynn, Oregon days, so years and years earlier, that the police chief there had done an investigation of somebody, and there seemed to be some racial issues involved with that, and that I should have fired that police chief. Very interesting if it was all true. The investigation they were referring to happened years after I left West Lynn. And that the idea that I should have fired him came that we had some allegations against him while I was there, but we had thoroughly investigated, not only hired one investigator, but actually hired two different investigators to investigate what had happened and what was going on. And he was essentially cleared of almost everything in it, with a couple of minor things sustained, like failure to discipline an officer, but those were a decade earlier, before he was even in West Lynn. But somehow, these people who knew me in West Lynn decided that they wanted to sabotage my next job also. And instead of talking to me about it, and I had talked about it during my interview with South Pasadena City Council, but instead of following up with me, they simply withdrew the offer. And it made public headlines and made it difficult for me to get another position at that point. But that's the key thing that you would see. You would see some other things too, and if you Google me and you have questions, I'm more than willing to answer anything. As I tell people, I worked in government for 35 years. Every email I ever wrote, every memo I ever wrote, literally every written note I ever took is available to the public. And so there's no reason for me to lie about anything or hide anything, because it's out there and anybody can have it. So, and I will be honest with you, I'm very proud of my record as a city manager and in government in general. And so I'm more than willing to talk about anything that's occurred, and I feel good about it.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any follow-up on that?
Any follow-up questions?
Yeah, let's just get it out there, right?
away.
You said you were the longest tenured city manager in West Lynn?
Yeah.
So explain to us the circumstances of your departure, please.
Yeah, In the election of November 2014, two sitting councilmen, at this point, they'd gone to the mayor and two council member positions every 2 years, and the other 2 years. So in that election, two council members were up. The council had to deal with a very controversial issue in the previous couple of years. It's a water treatment plant project inside the city of West Lynn, but it's a different city's water treatment plant. And it was a very big project, and the neighborhood came unglued, and everybody was very upset about it. Ultimately, the city council approved it. We actually negotiated a $5 million fee from that city for us to as a franchise fee to the city. Lots of controversy about it. The council did the right thing because the project was appealed to the state level, which Oregon has a Land Use Board of Appeals at the state level, and you kind of go through that before you go to appeals court. Land Use Board of Appeals reviewed the situation, remanded it back to the council on a technicality, but also very clearly said in accordance with the law, you made the right decision. So it was the right decision by the council, but it was controversial. After that, two council members did not get reelected. Those things happen. That left the council with a 3-2 split, 3 supportive of me, 2 who I would say were not supportive of me. It's fine. Then the mayor moved out of town and had to resign. Great mayor, but he moved. That left a 2-2 split. And it was so bad, the split was bad enough between those 4 that they didn't even attempt to put a 5th member on the council because they knew they would never agree. Yeah, so this went on for about 6 months or so, and it wasn't getting better, and an election was coming up to replace get the 5th member of the council. And at that point, I could tell that it probably would be somebody who was probably not supportive of me. And this would be, and so I called a closed session with the city council, and I told them, I said, I think after 10 years here, I have a shelf life, and I think I've hit it. Because I don't want to be an election issue. I shouldn't be. The city manager should never be an election issue. I should not be a political issue, but I was starting to become one because I'd been there for so long. And I said, so under the circumstances, as long as you are willing to honor my contract and give me my severance package, I'll resign and I'll make it easy on everybody. And the two council members who were really supportive of me agreed also. I had talked to them individually ahead of time and said, I just think it's time for everybody. So that's what happened. So I was not fired. I did resign. And I am perfectly honest to say that a few months later after that election, there's a distinct possibility I would have been fired. I know that. Yeah.
Any other follow-up questions on that issue? Great. Next question.
So in this position, you will oversee and have accountability of a $103 million budget and 350 plus staff while managing a complex public sector agency. Please share your background with the budget and financial oversight and experience generating creative funding streams. And additionally, what have you learned thus far about the city's budget, income sources, and funding needs?
Great. Well, let me hit just a little bit on your budget and things like that. It's about a $100 million budget. You've got about a $40 million general fund. A third, 35%, something like that, comes from the land leases for the solar panels. Those are the key pieces. You have, I think, $30 million in enterprise funds. As you said, you've got over 300 staff people. About, I think, 220 are full-time. The rest typically, I think, are part-time seasonals, typically during the summers probably, or at least for Parks and Rec. That's in a very high level. That's kind of what I can tell you about your budget at this point. In terms of my experience, I've been a finance director in a city of 35,000 people with a budget of over $100 million. I've been a city manager for 15 years, overseeing all these different things. I work at the Office of Management and Budget, where I was a budget examiner and a unit chief overseeing part of HHS's, Department of Health and Human Services, budget. Part that I was looking at was less than $1 billion, but I also had responsibility for staff that did what was known as, I can't remember the name, but that oversaw basically a $70 billion component of the federal government that was the HHS discretionary budget. So that's the kind of experience I've had doing budgets. Creative, and in terms of budgets, just in Oregon, Oregon has a citizens budget committee. Every city is required to have a citizens budget committee, which takes the 5 members of the city council and adds 5 citizen members, and they are the first ones as a group to review the budget. So you usually have anywhere from 4 to 6 or 7 meetings with the budget committee, which I also had to run and help with and do all that kind of stuff. So, I've done basically everything you can do when it comes to budgeting. When it comes to creative revenue sources, every state has different rules around what you can do in terms of revenue. I'll give you the most creative one I did was in Oregon. When I was in West Lynn, West Lynn had the lowest property tax rates in the state and the lowest utility rates in the state, and we couldn't raise utility rates more than 5% in a year without going to a vote. And property taxes in Oregon, you can only increase them for like 3 years or 5 years, something like that. And it has to be approved at an election where you have at least a 50% turnout, which is not easy to have happen either. So lots and lots of challenges in trying to make something happen. When I got to West Lynn, the city was just really struggling financially. And so we put a measure on the ballot for I think a public safety levy for about 5 years, if I remember correctly. And it passed overwhelmingly, but the voter turnout was 45%, and it had to be 50%. And even if all those people to get to 50% had voted against it, it would have passed overwhelmingly anyways, but it didn't matter. So we had a community that wanted services, wanted a high level of service, but couldn't figure out a way to pay for it. So we did something that was creative. We took the park system, of which there's about 500 acres of parks in West Lynn. It was a key component of what people wanted in West Lynn was those parks. And we defined the park system as a utility, just like streets, water, sewer, etc. We categorize it as a utility by ordinance. And then we took the maintenance component of the park system, and we charged the community like some amount, like I want to say $2 per household, something like that, to help maintain the park system. We could do that in Oregon. California, you couldn't do that in. In Oregon, we could. And the interesting thing was very few people were upset by it. As a matter of fact, we got a lot of pats on the back for figuring that out, that we could actually make that work. But that's probably the most creative funding source that I've come up with in the past. I mean, you can also, I know cities that took their sewer systems and in order to get money for streets, did a franchise fee on their own sewer systems in order to pay for streets. I mean, those are kinds of things that you can do. In the end, you're still just taxing your own residents and businesses. You're just being creative about how you get to it. Most things are that way. That's kind of how it works. I've done some other things, more creative things to get revenues in. I'll give you another one real quick. I told you that we had a really good finance department by the time I'd been in West Lynn for a while. We contracted out the management team, the director and the assistant director to other cities, and those cities paid us for their time. So we got $100,000, $150,000, $200,000 a year from these other cities to pay for some of our staff. We did things like that too. Yeah.
Any follow-up questions?
Please share your experience establishing and maintaining a culture of excellence for past local government agencies.
Yeah, I think I touched on that a little bit already with trying to create this culture. But in terms of trying to create a culture where people really do achieve, one of the things that we did was we created an award system for our staff, both in West Lynn and in Los Altos. We did this. And what we did was we took 3 or 4 kind of categories, the category of like maybe sort of a lifetime achievement, somebody who maybe didn't take on one specific project that year, but is just always overachieving on everything. We took one where it was more of a specific project, somebody who had just done something tremendous during that year. We had another one, for example, for customer service, because we always want to emphasize customer service. And so who on staff really does that, both internally to internal customers, but really even more to external customers. And so we put an award system together, and we had a kind of a banquet. I mentioned this barbecue that we did beginning of the fiscal year. That's when we did it in Los Altos. And we put together a committee of staff members and anybody on staff could nominate their colleagues for these different awards. And then we had a staff committee review them and determine, who got them. I will admit I got first cut to take a look at who the nominees were. In all honesty, because sometimes there are things happening that the rest of the staff doesn't necessarily know about. So me and the HR department kind of look at them real quick, make sure that we all thought that they actually qualified. Then we'd have the staff committee kind of decide who should get them, and it was kept very quiet. And then I would announce them at this big banquet. And the award didn't need to be a whole lot of money. It had to be, but it had to be something. It had to be something tangible. So what we did was we gave, I think the award winners got 2 or 3 days of vacation added. One-time deal, you get a couple of extra days of vacation to show that we appreciate what you did. And once we did that the first time and people found out what the award was, people wanted those awards. Even if it was only a couple of days of vacation, that's valuable. That's really valuable to them. And people like that. I mean, it was a big deal when people got those awards. It really was, and they really appreciated it. And those are the kinds of things that you can do to try to raise the level of everybody. But again, if you build this culture where you have a team and everybody wants to accomplish and be supported, you don't usually have to do a whole lot. People want to float the boat a little higher that way.
Any follow-up questions? Okay. So we're on question number 4. You can ask some of those follow-up questions unless you feel confident that they were answered well. Okay, then we're on to question number 5.
Describe a situation where you managed a difficult employee who wasn't meeting expectations despite attempts to address the issue. How did you handle the challenge and what was the outcome? Please also describe what you have done to inspire a top performer.
Oh, good. So a difficult employee, and difficult can mean lots of different things. I mean, some people are difficult to work with, but can still do a good job what they're tasked to do. Other people simply are good to work with, but don't accomplish what they're supposed to accomplish. When you have somebody who maybe not accomplishing what they should, and there's lots of different reasons why that may be the case. What I've done before, for example, was the first thing I did after 2 or 3 months of noticing that somebody was not doing their job, not able to get everything done that they needed to get done. First thing we did was we offloaded some of their work. We said, okay, you're having a problem with this big box. Let's make the box a little smaller for right now and move some of these things over here to somebody else. Because again, we want you to be successful. So let's get you successful at these key things, and then we can start adding back in some of these other things once you get this stuff done. So that's one tactic. The other tactic is also making sure that whoever else knows about this job can help mentor the individual and help try to bring them along and coach them a bit. Now, in one case I can think of, this smaller box, the person still wasn't accomplishing it. It just wasn't getting done. And eventually after 6 months I had to let the person go because there's typically a probationary period and you've got to make decisions at that point. And so sometimes that happens. The other issue that I find, particularly as a city manager, because typically I'm dealing with department heads and management staff, one of the things that I tell them, and if hired here, I would tell the management staff here too, what I look for in a department director isn't just that they're an expert, but they have to be what I refer to as the expert in the room. When they come in, when they address all of you, when they address the community, they need to be able to speak and talk to you in a way that makes you trust them and believe them. If they're doing lots of hemming and hawing and changing positions all the time, I mean, if the city engineer comes in and can't answer straightforward questions, you're not going to be very trusting of that individual, the finance director. So I tell them you have to be the expert in the room. You've got to be able to carry this also. And the last thing I always tell them is, and one of the things that they need to do is they constantly need to be monitoring the trust level of the council with them and their trust with me. Because if they start to lose the trust of the council, and we can see it, I mean, it's pretty clear in a meeting if the council has stopped listening, paying attention to somebody, not trusting them anymore, I can't resurrect that. It's not going to happen. So they need to be, and these people should be experts in the field. They should be able to see if they're losing trust. And if so, let's fix it right then. Let's figure out what we need to do to fix it, because if it goes on very long, we're going to lose you. And so that's something else that happens, and that would be a difficult problem. In terms of high achievers, what do we do with them? What I love to do is take people who are really accomplishing things and have tons of potential and move them into other positions on a temporary basis. This is where I differentiate between mentoring and coaching. Mentors, I think, make you feel good in your job, make you feel comfortable. Coaches make you feel uncomfortable. They put you in positions where you have to achieve something beyond your typical comfort level. I mean, if you're coaching basketball, for example, and somebody keeps missing every shot and they're dribbling off their foot, you don't keep patting them on the back, say, oh, that's fine, that's fine. It's not. You got to work harder. You got to get better. We're going to make you do something a little different to get better at it. With somebody who's really a high performer, this is what you do with them. You put them in a different position. I'll give you an example. When I was in West Lynn, my assistant city manager a couple of times had to go out on maternity leave. Great. I took somebody else on staff who I thought was a high achiever and moved them into the assistant city manager position during that time and gave them really not just kind of the role, but specific assignments that were important right then to accomplish. One person I put on in there, we started a West Lynn Leadership Academy. West Lynn did not have a leadership group or anything like that. We started one. We thought people needed to have a better understanding of how their government operates, and so we started a leadership academy, and this person started it. He got it going. He did great. Absolutely fantastic. The other thing I did while he was in that interim assistant city manager position, I missed a council meeting. And I did it on purpose, and the council knew I was going to. And I missed it to make him sit in my chair at a council meeting just once and have that feeling of not being comfortable, of that little extra stress, that little extra tension. And I knew he would do well, and the council knew he would do well. But that's what you do. With high achievers, you keep pushing them to do something a little more, something a little bit different, and they will do well at it. And that individual ended up being my community development director. He was fantastic. But that's what I think you do with high achievers. You keep pushing them, keep prodding them just a little bit more and get as much out of them as you can, because they'll appreciate that. And I'm sure that when he went and was interviewing for his next job, they asked, what's your experience in dealing with city council? He goes, heck, I was the acting city manager. I sat there in front of the council as a city manager for a meeting or two. That's great.
All right, Mr. Jordan. Well, sorry, any follow-up questions? I didn't let you ask that.
I didn't see any, so you're up to you.
Thank you, Mr. Jordan. Share your experience working with elected officials and what your overall philosophy is regarding working with the city council and ensuring that there are open lines of communication and regular interactions.
Great. First of all, if you were to hire me, one of the first things I would do, maybe even the first day, when I got to Los Altos, was literally my first day, was taken up by a meeting with each council member individually for an hour or two. I have a kind of a series of questions I might ask, especially, for example, I will give you one of the key questions that I would ask you. Why did you run for office? I mean, what is it that you wanted to accomplish? What is it that you were fighting against? What is it? Because part of my job, I want you as a council to be successful. And I assume you want me to be successful. So let's try to figure out how you're going to measure success. If you ran for office and you wanted to do A, B, C, what can I do to help you accomplish A, B, and C? We all know that eventually you're going to have to get 3 votes on the council to make that happen, but what can I do to help? That's my job. So that's where we start from, is what can I do to help make you successful? We'll talk about relationships, how you have your relationships with each other, with staff, et cetera. We'll go through all of that to try to get to know each other and give me a feel for what's going on. But then after that, what we'll do is typically, in my experience, I have typically met And again, it depends upon the individual council member. I have council members who used to drop in every other day into my office. Great. Come on in anytime. Unless I'm in a meeting or something like that, I'm always available to you. And that's terrific. For those who don't have quite as much time, we schedule at least a once a month or once every 2 week lunch together, breakfast together, something like that, so we can touch base and talk about whatever issues are coming up, whatever you've been hearing in the community. There may be some things that I want to share that maybe are not what I would refer to as ripe for the general public at a meeting like this, so we can talk about that individually at that time. So those are the kinds of things that I do. You would also get a weekly memo from me that outlines different things that are going on in City Hall. Of course, I'm careful not to hit on anything that's too sensitive because those are public records and people can have them. But I always tell councils, if somebody asks, you can give it to that memo to somebody. But generally speaking, again, those issues may not be ripe for a big council meeting. So if you can try to just recognize that those may be a little sensitive, please try to. If there's a personnel matter, I might write something in. We're having some personnel issues in a couple of departments. Please come see me if you have questions. Just to tip you off so you can come on in and talk to me and I can talk to you about those things. Personnel matters otherwise are my problem, not your problem, but I do want you to be informed. I don't want you to be surprised. I don't want you to be, have somebody in the community come to you and say, what the heck's going on with this? But those discussions need to take place behind closed doors with me. So I'll put some things like that. So you'd get a weekly memo from me about what's happening, what to expect, maybe upcoming agendas, what's something that may be happening that way. You'll get that every week from me also. And again, you can come on in and see me anytime. You'll get emails from me constantly. You would get all those different things, but I will absolutely tell you that nothing beats the one-on-one occasional meeting between us, because that's how the best communication comes. You'll get texts from me, you can get anything. However you want me to communicate with you, I'll communicate with you. The other thing that I've done in each community is I started a weekly city manager newsletter to the community on top of all that, where we outline, each department has a section and they put in different things that are going on in their departments. Parks and Rec, it's easy, they just talk about their activities, that's always fun stuff. And finance, somebody may have a difficult time, but they come up with things on occasion. So we do that also because I want to make sure the community remains constantly informed as to what we're doing and what may be on the horizon. So those are the kinds of things of how I not only interact with you, but with the community also.
I have a follow-up question to that, and we hadn't even talked about this. So in being communicative with the community, how would you foresee giving that information literally, by a letter that will be delivered because we do use our utility mailers, right?
Yep.
But there's an online presence,
Yep.
right? Have you dealt with the online presence of information? And please elaborate just on how you've managed that.
That is a great question. So when social media was really starting to grow, and I'm going to say this is probably 2011, 12, something like that, at least in the government world. My assistant city manager, who also handled communications in Westland, put together a communications plan. And we took to the city council. And what there was in there was all the various ways we can communicate with the public, from social media to advertisements in the local newspaper, to letters to the editor, to mailers with the utility bills, to right down to personal contact and knocking on doors. I mean, there's all these different tools we have that we can use to communicate with the public. And then for each project that we were working on, the idea was that the department, working with our communications folks, would determine what was the best tool to use to communicate on that. And you would think it's, the bigger the better. It isn't necessarily. And I'll give you an example. We had a large 5 million gallon reservoir project in Westland. We had a failing reservoir in the middle of a neighborhood that was going to have to be replaced. Huge project. Big impacts on the neighbors around it. We decided from the very beginning that we would not start by just advertising this to the whole world. I mean, some people in the community knew we were going to do it, but what somebody thought about that project who lives 2 miles away is very different than what somebody lives literally with it in their backyard. So what we did was our public works director and our communications person literally went door to about the nearest 20 or 30 houses around there and knocked on the doors. Before the project started, before we'd actually even hired the engineering consultant to do the work on it, they knocked on the doors. And they said to people who answered their doors, here's who we are, this is the project, this is basically the schedule at this point, but before we get anywhere into this project, we want to hear from you and know what your concerns are and what you're going to be looking for in this project. Is it more trees in your backyard to block it? Is it, one person said, a sidewalk over on this part would be great because if people don't have any place, things like that. That's what we wanted to hear, but we wanted to hear that from them first. Then after that, we did the mass mailings, we did the social media, but we wanted to make sure that we had opened up communication with the most affected people face to face from the very beginning. So that's what we did with that project. Other things that we do, letters to the editor. We used to work with council members to have letters to the editor in the local newspaper every week, basically, from a different council member, from the mayor, things like that, that would discuss what's going on in City Hall. Again, just another way to inform the public. We could always buy space in the newspaper, but if we could do this was even better. So we do all those different methods, as well as the city manager newsletter, which goes on our website every week, or could be emailed directly to anybody who wants it. All those tools are available, and the key thing is to keep trying to figure out which ones are best for each project, and then go with that.
Any follow-up questions?
Just out of curiosity, and I'd asked this before, are you familiar at all with Nevada's open meeting law and the responsibility for council persons to have most of their information in common publicly?
Yeah, generally speaking, I've looked at Nevada public meeting law. It's a little different than California, which is a little different than Oregon. They all have their little twists and turns to them. Generally speaking, I know it. I'd have to get a little more familiar with Nevada public meeting law regarding closed sessions. I've seen some things in there, but I don't know them all real well. California's was different than Oregon's. Oregon's was different in how you do agendas and how you can change agendas. They're all just a little bit different, but generally speaking, I think they're all essentially the same, that you, whenever there's a quorum of a council, you have to be doing it in a public meeting, and it has to be open to the public. They have to be able to see it. You have to give public comment time. Generally speaking, they all work basically the same. The nuances, frankly, I would have to learn. But I'm sure that the city clerk and the city attorney, everybody knows them pretty well and would teach me inside of about the first hour and a half, or pound me in the head if I didn't get it.
Thank you. Question number 7.
Yeah.
Share what you've learned thus far about Boulder City's form of government and its pros and cons.
Well, I love this form of government. I love the council manager form of government. This is where I've made my living. People often ask me to describe what a council manager form of government is like. And I always describe it as, think about the private sector. You've got a private board, you have a board of directors representing the shareholders. They hire a CEO who then runs the corporation from there. This is essentially the same way. You are representing the shareholders of the community. You've been elected to do this job. You set the policies. You set establish the laws, the regulations, all that. It's my job to carry it on out. That's my job. Now, on top of that, you've got commissions, you've got advisory boards, you've got others, citizen groups, helping you make those decisions, bringing information to you so you make those decisions. And I have staff who are expertise in those areas, who are helping those commissions make good advice, give you good advice, make good decisions, and bring it to you. This is the way a local government should operate. Some cities, as didn't mention this earlier, or maybe I did, when I was in West Lynn, some people really wanted a strong mayor form of government. They wouldn't say it publicly because they knew if they did, they would just be ostracized. But some people really wanted it. And before I got there, that's essentially what it was. The city manager before me, because I talked to staff about it, the city manager before me, if you had a big issue, you went to the city manager, she would say, go talk to the mayor. She wouldn't, because the mayor had to make all the decisions. That's not the way this form of government is supposed to operate. and I'm accountable to all of you. Your success in part is based upon my level of success. My level of success is largely based upon what the staff's success. And you will hold me accountable if I'm not doing what you want to do. And that's exactly the way it should work. Does that respond to the question? Am I?
Unless there's any follow-ups.
Okay,
I have one.
good.
Kind of related to the form of government, but have you had the chance to look at the charter for Boulder City? And if so, what stands out to you?
Yeah, I've looked at it somewhat. I didn't dig into all the details, but I will tell you one thing that stood out to me was you have to go to a vote to sell public land, if I remember right, maybe sell or lease public land of a certain size. And I can't remember what the size was. I just suddenly just forgot it. West Lynn had a very similar charter provision that they could not sell or lease public land, only there was no threshold. So when we wanted to put, for example, a sidewalk along the edge of a road, but the right-of-way wasn't wide enough for the sidewalk and there was a park there, we had to go to a vote. When the city wanted to put a water line through a park, and this did happen before I got there, wanted to put a water line, you would think it would just go right in an easement. Nope, doesn't work that way. Had to go to a vote to put an underground water line through a park that nobody would ever see, nobody would ever touch, but you had to go to a vote. There was one point where we had a small easement of some kind for, I can't remember, a communications thing or something like that. I think it was 20 square feet, maybe, had to go to a vote. So when I saw that, my first thought was, oh boy, that could scare some city managers off, but I know that yours is not a big problem. So that's one key thing that I saw in there, if you want. Yeah.
Okay, so you've received the updated strategic plan for our city. What did you like? What questions do you have about it? And how would you ensure that we accomplish our priorities?
Yeah, couple things. First of all, I liked it a lot. I liked the process a lot. I like how you put it together. It's very similar to what I have done in other communities, particularly in Los Altos. We did a very similar kind of strategic plan. The one thing you did different was that you had the staff working group helping put all of that together. We didn't do that, and I kind of wish we had. Looking at it, I kind of thought that would have relieved some of the pressure off of me and some of the stress of having put it together. But otherwise, yeah, I think you have measurable items in there. You're also, I think, if I can say, smart enough to think globally and thinking long term, as opposed to doing, here's our goals for this year, and then come back in a year and say, okay, now we're going to do these, and then we're going to do these. Much smarter to do these long-term goals. You can then align that with your financial forecast and your financial planning to try to tie projects on in when they can be done, what it looks like financially. And that makes a lot of sense to do this global scale that way. So I thought that was really good. I don't have any issues or anything like that with any of the specific projects or anything, but I do like that process and how you went about doing that. Now, there was a question, how do we ensure we accomplish these priorities? Well, I think every year we need to come back and we need to make sure that we are on target and aligned with how we do with each step. I think you do quarterly updates of it. That's exactly what I've done before. Not only do we put something out, like a brochure that the public can have, put it on our website, but we sit down as a group and we talk about it. Each quarter, we run through what we've done, what we haven't done, what needs to be accomplished. Also, I would fully expect that my performance evaluation will be in large part based upon how we're doing on those priorities. That to me are my marching orders. That's my mission to get those done. A couple other things that we would try to do is, like on agenda cover sheets, we put a cover sheet on each agenda. If the item is related to one of your specific priorities, we put that on there. And the reason why I want to do things like that is I want to make sure it grabs your attention and grabs the community's attention. I have worked with city councils before that were very goal-oriented, that when something came in from the side kind of and said, somebody would come and say, you should be doing this, where the council would stop and say, hold on a second, that sounds like a great idea, but are we going to be willing to drop any of our other priorities to do it? Because we only have so many resources. And if they weren't willing to, they said, we'll bring it up the next time we have our strategic plan. But right now, we're focused here. And I think by putting it on the agendas that way, it kind of grabs your attention. It keeps focusing you on it. The other thing is I've had councils who had large projects, but councils that got easily distracted. So, and I will give you an example. The community center in Los Altos that we built, $35 million project. We had architects, a whole design task force of community members working on this for probably 18 months or so. Finally got it out to bid, got the contract on in, ready to go to the council, and there was another topic on the council's agenda that night that was compared to I guess it's a $27 million contract on a major priority. This other item was nothing compared to that. But the council got distracted. They finally got to this contract after 1 o'clock in the morning. And they had citizens there who'd been working on this who wanted to discuss it. That's what I mean by getting distracted. I don't want any of us to get distracted. So if you put it on the agenda, say this is a priority, let's focus on it. Let's get it right up front. Let's take the time that we need on that item, and then let's do the rest after that. So that's how I think we just keep pushing these priorities.
Any follow-up questions?
Okay, so what questions do you have for us, the panel?
Oh, good. You ready? Well, let me start with one. Most people like to get on up here and say, so what challenges do you see facing Boulder City over the next 5 years, et cetera? Let's turn that around. What opportunities do you see for Boulder City? When you ran, you probably had a vision, or you had something, maybe you said, 10 years from now, I would like to change X. I would like to do Y. What is that? What is it that if you could wave the magic wand, jump ahead 10 years, what would you see that might be different, or what would you feel like you wanted to accomplish?
For the record, I was given number 9 to ask, but you're right, I did ask the question. So I guess for me, and we've talked about it, and you can see from our strategic plan what was important to us, because we're part of the group that helped to establish that. Definitely our pool is, in 10 years, I'd love to have that magic wand and see our pool filled with kids and adults who are enjoying that service. Also would love to see the opportunity to make sure that our downtown areas that might not have businesses currently in them have the opportunity to have some revitalization and some community experiences that we can have there that might be different. Let's see, magic wand, you said?
Whatever wand you have.
Our sense of community is highly important to us here. We're a small community and we like it. But I'd also like to not become smaller and smaller to the point where we become Route 66. And so ideally, I would love to see the opportunity for us to somehow attract young families to come back here.
Good.
My vision for the future would be to see tourism expanded upon so that the small businesses can grow and we can see more thriving businesses downtown. So to work on ways to bring more tourism and tourism dollars into Boulder City. That's what my vision would like. I'd like to see that and work on that.
Good.
Yeah, I'm right there with Koki, help open the eyes of some of the community on, rethinking short-term rentals and, possible legalization of OHVs to bring in the outside monies, because we don't want to grow and build houses, but we need to grow economically. And, how can we do that without, building up the population?
Got it.
Some of us, we don't want to change anything.
Okay.
That is kind of the philosophy of slow growth as opposed to no growth. And one of the ways we do that is we allow the tourism sector, we allow the leases for solar and battery. We want to allow the safety aspect of the community to continue. One of the challenges that we have is we are shrinking our student population and growing our senior population. So how do we allow somebody who's lived here for 40 years or 60 years to be able to stay in Boulder City and still afford something? The challenges that we have are our land. What are we going to do with the land as opposed to make more of fill in the blank, or do we want our land to be what we do? So as I look at Boulder City, we want to be able to continue to have relationships with the greater Las Vegas, Clark County area so that we are not only getting along, but we are making sure that they understand how pivotal a place we have here. When we meet in different committee rooms, we each get equal vote as Las Vegas. We get an equal vote as Clark County. We get an equal vote as Henderson. So we have to protect the ability that we have to influence how the general growth of the whole area is. And so with our ability to be, and we learned the word authentic in what we do and how we do it, is critical for us. So we aren't stick in the muds as much as we are making use of the history that we have in Boulder City. We literally built the dam.
Yeah.
And so we have a history of pioneers. And we now are in the phase of pioneering the next phase of our growth as individuals and as a community. And so we want to continue to be attractive. We want people to come and visit. We don't necessarily want them to stay. And at the same time, we have to recognize that in order for us to grow in the greater Las Vegas area, they need us because they need our land to protect the endangered species. They need our land to produce electricity. California needs our land to produce electricity. We are in a very unique place. If you were to describe Boulder City, I'd say we're in the driver's seat for pretty much everything that goes on because they need us. And so we need to make sure that we portray ourselves not as lording over everybody, but recognizing how critical we are to the greater good of the Las Vegas, Clark County area and indeed the state of Nevada.
Yeah.
I'm off my soapbox.
No, that's good.
Well, I can't be the odd person out on council, so I'll just to add,
Yeah.
right? We have a lot of times in small communities, our children that grow up here, and this is nationwide, right? So I'm glad I'm getting out of that little town and I'm never coming back, right? And we don't want that, right? We want those that grow up here to have such a positive experience that it's about returning after they go off to college or seek their fortunes elsewhere or bring and seek them here. And so I think there's one thing, and it's stated in a negative way, but it can be turned to a positive. We need to be small town, but not small-minded. And so we need to have a vision and anticipate and recognize the signs of how the world is changing. Even though we like our world how it is, we can't ignore what's going on around us. And so a lot of the factors that have been brought up will help us to be visionary and to drive our economy so that we're vibrant yet historic. And so there's a lot of, almost contrary thought, but we can blend them. And that's the unique thing about a city manager here in Boulder City, right?
And what's interesting about that, Stephen, for all of you, is the other two communities that I've worked in face very similar issues. How do you keep that community the way you like it? Because people move to Boulder City, just as they move to Los Altos or to a West Linn, for a reason. And how do you make sure that you maintain that reason why they moved there, the small town feel, the community feel, while at the same time enhancing it, keeping a thriving economic base of some kind, so that they will continue to want to live there, and so that new people will want to come on in when there's houses available, et cetera. The younger families, that's where your pool comes in, the park system, things like that. So, that is very similar, trying to get that balancing of what is good and positive and what is over the top. I think that's my one key question for all of you.
So speaking of one key question, we've come basically to the close. And so in your closing statement and anything else you think that we need to be aware of or know, we would like to hear from you, and somebody else has something else they want to ask.
If you don't mind,
At
so
least
that we
two.
let him wrap up
Yeah.
in the conclusion, I want to ask that same question that I asked earlier about the potential, if you were to be selected as the city manager, one of your first responsibilities would be to hire a deputy city manager. So what type of candidate would you be looking for, and how do you envision dividing up responsibilities between city manager and deputy in moving forward?
Yeah. Let me start by, in terms of anticipating how you split it up, I think it totally depends upon who gets hired, because you want to take advantage of whatever expertise and experience they have. So, and I wouldn't want to predetermine what that's necessarily going to be. Now, my understanding is that it's expected that the deputy will also be the HR director. But again, I think that can be changed, if we get somebody with a different skill set. So I don't want to predetermine what divisions or departments that they might be doing or that they might be overseeing or anything like that, depending upon who we hire. So you want to hire the best person, not the best piece of paper on their resume. We want the best person.
Let me clarify, that
Yeah.
would fall on your shoulders. So
Thank you.
talk about specifically how
Me.
you would go about that
Me.
and the type of candidate you're looking for, and then proceeding from there.
Perfect. Well, let me tell you a little bit more about myself. As if you went through the assessment of me, you'll see I think very globally. I do not manage by checklists. I have my lists and things like that, but I am a little bit more creative. I've worked for people who manage by checklists, who constantly do that. That's great. We need that. I would want to make sure that whoever gets hired in that position fills my gaps. The things that I don't do as well, I want them to be able to do well. So for example, when I promoted somebody into assistant city manager in West Linn or to deputy city manager in Los Altos, I made sure that those were the types of individuals who did keep those lists, who did track things much more closely. I've got 10 different things going on at once. I need somebody else who says, and meets with me after each council meeting and says, okay, here's my list, city manager, this is my list of what came on out. What's your list? What did you have? And they have their list, and we compare them, and then they can follow up. That's important to me. The person needs to fill the gaps that I have. And I can figure those things out. I know where my weaknesses are. There are plenty of them. I know where they are. So that's what I would be looking for in that person. In terms of what they might oversee, again, it just depends upon who that person is. I mean, I think in this environment, public safety is always a priority, and we've made budget cuts in each of my cities before, and I've always said, and I would tell everybody here, parks, everybody else, as much as I love all of you, public safety is the priority. And so I think the public safety divisions have to constantly be reporting directly to the city manager. I don't think there's any choice on that one. But then we would figure out who everybody else is, or what they do best, and go from there. But let me tell you about what I look for in management employees in general. And I kind of touched on this before. They have to be an expert. They got to be able to carry themselves as an expert when they talk to you or talk to the community. They've got to be able to do that. And finally, they need to be politically astute and understand what's going on in the world around them. They have to be creative. Those are the kinds of things that I look for. And finally, they need to have a sense of humor. And you know, I worked for people before who literally couldn't laugh at themselves. They had no ability. When I was at OMB, they did every year there was a what they called budget examiners day, and this is after the budget came out in January, February. Everybody's exhausted. The budget examiners, the staff, there's only 500 of them at OMB, if you can believe that, would do kind of skits. And they would make fun, frankly, of the political appointees, the director, et cetera. I knew political appointees who would not attend that because they could not be made fun of. They couldn't stand it. Others loved it, but some couldn't. I don't want people who can't laugh at themselves every so often. I want people who are willing to make a mistake every so often, take a risk, be creative, and know that I will support them when they do that. Those are the kind of people I look for.
Any other follow-up questions before we get to the final question?
Not really a follow-up, just a question in general. Can you share a specific example of initiatives or projects you've led to enhance ADA compliance and accessibility for individuals with disabilities?
Ooh, great question. You know, each of the cities that I've been in, we've put together an accessibility plan. And we had one individual on staff who was responsible for monitoring that plan. And we attached, I can't remember how much money to each one of the different cities. Each year there was, I want to say maybe in Los Altos, $250,000, something like that. And we had the plan and we knew what we needed to do to make the community more accessible. And then we had the projects listed, how much each one, and we had one person who was responsible typically in Public Works for tracking those and making sure that they got done. And that's kind of how we did it. I'm trying to think of, I can't think of anything specific right now on that front. Los Altos City Hall was not accessible when I got there. One of the entrances did not have ramps or anything like that. We remodeled it, made it accessible. So there was ramps, there were door opening buttons, all that kind of stuff. But that would be one of those projects on the list. Yeah.
Thank you.
Yep.
I was going to ask, as city manager, you will be involved in negotiations. If you were to teach a class in negotiations, what are the top 3 tools you would teach your students?
Ooh. Wow, I don't know if I can answer that question right off the top of my head. What I will tell you, particularly when it comes to like labor negotiations, got to be fair. I have sat in meetings before, including council meetings. I was in one early on when I was in Los Altos, where we had one of the council members was a CFO from a retired CFO from a big corporation, and he was kind of pounding the table about how much money the city had in reserve, and that it was just basically going not to waste, but it's just sitting there, and it doesn't grow, it doesn't do anything, and we should be putting it back in the system. And a couple of their council members were furious with him because he had talked about how much money the city had in reserve, and they were like, "We're going to labor negotiations. You can't be saying that because they'll think we have all this money." Well, the labor unions can see how much money we have. I mean, that shouldn't be an issue. Don't be afraid of things like that. And the point of negotiations should not be to just get the very best deal for management. It should be to be fair, because you want your employees to want to work here. You want them to feel like they're being treated fairly. If they're not, the best ones will leave because they'll have options and they'll have other opportunities. So you need to be fair. That doesn't mean you give them anything they want, not at all, nothing like that, but you want to be fair. And I think that's one of the most important things, and you want to be honest about that. If they think you're lying, you're going to be in real trouble. I'll give you a quick example. Back when I got to Oregon, they changed the tax system in Oregon in the late 90s, shortly after I got there, in which there used to be all these various serial levies for public safety parks. You had all these different pieces to your property tax. They rolled it all into one under a new constitutional amendment in Oregon, and all got rolled into one big thing. Well, several years later, there was a police union was negotiating. And they were upset because they believed that they were getting a smaller piece of the pie than they had before, that the city was taking money that originally would have gone to the police and using it for other purposes. And so the HR director called on me, because I was the ACM, and said, come on in and can you answer these questions for them? And they said that this is what they thought was happening. And I said, I don't have the numbers in front of me, but I can absolutely assure you that's not happening. I just know it's not happening. I've looked at the numbers, I know that's not happening. They said, well, can you give us some numbers? I said, sure. Went back, they all went to lunch, calculated the numbers. It only took me 10 minutes or so. I knew what they were. Went back, met with them after lunch, showed them the numbers, said, this is what you would have had. This is what you're actually getting. And I said, and you can see it's right in the budget. Those are the numbers. It all ties and everything else. Never brought it up again. That was it. Because they knew I was being honest with them and I was treating them fairly. That was important. Didn't try to hide it. And I think in negotiations like that, you got to do that. It doesn't mean that you just open your books and throw them on out there, but you're honest with people. They'll appreciate it, and you'll have a much better relationship.
So I guess going back to your original filling out stuff, where have you been for the last 4 years, and where do you want to be when you grow up?
The last 4 years, I've been in Scottsdale, Arizona. After the debacle with South Pasadena and everything else, talked to a couple of people I know who said, you know, I think you need to just take a step back, push the reset button, and get out of the limelight a little bit. Because I will tell you, after the South Pasadena issue, I went to another top-notch community in Southern California a week later, interviewed there, just got bombarded with questions about what happened in South Pasadena. I didn't get the job. I got literally called by one of the council members the next day, which has never happened to me. I mean, I was really odd. And he even said, he goes, I shouldn't be talking to you. He said, your 2 interviews with us were the best 2 interviews I have ever been in. He goes, you just need to understand we couldn't hire you. I said, I get it. But so at that point, it was time to push the reset button, take a step back. So we moved from California to Scottsdale, Arizona. I have looked at just a very few jobs since then because it needs to fit certain criteria for me, and this one does. So that's where I've been. Where do I want to be when I grow up? I want to be the city manager here for a little while at least, and then after that, hopefully be a part of this community for a long time.
Thank you, appreciate
Yeah.
it. Anyone else have any other questions? Your closing statement.
No, I didn't just make it. Thank you again for inviting me. I really do appreciate it. Thank you, Wendy, for recommending me to all of you. I think what you see with me is you get somebody who has lots of experience. I mean, again, 35 years in government, 15 years as a city manager. There's very few things that are ever going to come up that's going to really rattle me that I haven't seen before. Or if I haven't seen it before, it's not going to be that much different from what I've seen. I've been through the pandemic, seamlessly went from one day being open with all my staff there and the next day being at home on Zoom with the entire staff again. I mean, so I've been through the battles. Nothing shakes me up that way. But I bring, I think, a real passion to the job. I love what I do. Love being a city manager, and would like to do it here too. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Chris.
Thanks.
We're going to go ahead and take a quick break. Mayor, 5 or 10 minutes?
12 and a half.
12 and a half minutes, okay.
We're ready to call the meeting to order.
And we're live.
Yes, we're ready. Call the meeting back to order. Thank you. Turn the time back over to Wendy Brown, our able assistant and consultant.
Thank you. as I talked about earlier, we've met 2 candidates, and now it's our time to find out if we have a candidate of interest. If we do, what I'd like to do is go around and get your pulse on who you think that candidate is. And if we're not in alignment, I would highly recommend that we try to become aligned. So it's a 5-member vote. It's important, I think, for the community and for any community I work with, as well as the candidate, to know that there's a unanimous decision. I usually get a unanimous vote before we go out to an offer. It's not required. I do think that it's ideal, and I just would like to keep that in mind as we move forward in decision-making. And Mayor, I'm going to turn it over to you to get the pulse of your council on who their top candidate would be.
All right, well, I appreciate that. So inasmuch as this is the city council and we get to give our opinion, if I were to say my number 1 pick would be Ned Thomas and my second pick would be Chris Jordan.
Those are the 2. Sorry, I didn't mean to laugh that loud.
And so
And Mayor, would you like to go down from there? Would you like me to go ahead and lead that conversation?
I would like to hear from the other council people.
Okay. Matt, would you like to share your thoughts?
Yeah, very close.
Yeah.
Chris blew me away with his interview. I think he overcame some of the obstacles and some of the items that would be found online about him. And I think he would be a great candidate for this position. But again, we are a small town with the big spotlight. And so I think, again, I mean, Ned did a great job too. I'm going to have to go with Ned
Ned's
for my top pick.
okay.
But again, they both did great.
Yeah.
And they're equally awesome.
So I'm hearing from you that either one of them, but since I'm making you select
Well,
one, you're saying Ned.
Yeah, it's a very
Which is important because
close call.
sometimes our candidate, that's going to be my next question, just so you all know, if we're not able to get our candidate of interest, I'd like to get a pulse on whether or not we have 2 candidates that potentially get an offer. But Councilmember Booth, who's your top candidate?
My top candidate is Ned.
Okay, thank you.
And again, I thought they both were superior. They were great candidates.
Great. Councilmember Walton?
First of all, Mayor, I apologize. I thought you were making humorous, like it's either one of those 2, and so I was going along with what I thought was humor, so I apologize if it seemed disrespectful. Coming into this, my big question mark was Mr. Jordan going to be a legitimate candidate because the perception of what we'll call baggage from those issues that have been reported on, and we know that reports vary in accuracy wildly. And so that was a concern, and I hope I'm not alone in being willing to vocalize that. But I do feel that understanding the totality of what occurred and what he was a part of and not a part of helped me to elevate him as not just another candidate, but legitimate as a potential hire here. And so I want to say that to the council, to the public, because I have received feedback that kind of went along with the internet search that seemed to be condemning
Right.
exceedingly.
Yeah.
But as it turns out, a total miss. Mm-hmm. And so, that said, I feel that this is not an easy decision.
Yeah.
I was hoping for an easier decision. And so I will say, thank you for ultimately bringing forth some candidates who
Sure.
turned out to be very strong
Good.
for Boulder City.
Yeah. It's
And-
my job to make it a
Well,
difficult
you know,
decision.
I was skeptical, and I think you might have picked up on that
Yeah,
a
I
little
did.
bit in some of our conversations.
Yeah.
And so I appreciate that. I appreciate the efforts. I appreciate the candidates being here and being open with us. That said, years of experience aren't necessarily the qualifier over another person, in my opinion. And I think Chris Jordan could say he holds the advantage in the years of experience, particularly in the city manager role. And his answers reflected seasoning and experience and lessons learned through whatever, we'll call it hard knocks, mistakes, good coaching, or good instincts, whatever. He hit the mark on a lot of the things that I think are important. I think not to Steve Walton, I think are important for the qualities of a city manager in Boulder City. I'm sorry I'm taking way longer than just a yes or a no, but I think for deliberation, it's helpful to me, and hopefully it'll be helpful to my fellow council members. A few of the qualities I think are important in leadership is to be very self-aware of your strengths and your weaknesses. They both seemed to show that. And I do really appreciate Chris Jordan's statement that I need somebody that fills my gaps as a deputy, right? And then the coaching and counseling, quickly discerning between employees that are difficult to work with but great at their task, and those employees that need to be brought along in their job performance. And that was distinct in his answer from Mr. Thomas. And not to say that Mr. Thomas doesn't recognize that, because he hit on some very important points in leadership as well, but that stood out to me. Excuse me. That said, Mr. Thomas was very ready to give credit to his team members, and I think that's another important quality of leadership. And I think that also encouraging the council to go look him up on the internet. Please read them all. And sometimes that can be a scary proposition, because you never know what's out there, but that showed a great degree of confidence and certainty in his work and in his professional interactions. I appreciate that Mr. Thomas is very much about connecting with employees and helping develop them and understanding them in their journey in the way that they can be assisted along in their performance. I think accountability in job performance for department heads and coaching where needed is very important, and to recognize those roles. And I didn't see a lot of differentiation between the two necessarily in many of the answers. In negotiations, they both kind of hit the mark on the question that Councilmember Booth spoke of. They both recognize the essential value of the strategic plan that Boulder City has, and seemed to be entirely bought in on the process that we went through, the goals that we have, the metrics, and how to work towards getting those things accomplished. Mr. Thomas comes from a town that has similar challenges in aging and infrastructure and so forth, has small town experience. Mr. Jordan also knows that that balance between staying who we are, yet making sure we're vibrant. So the one thing that Mr. Thomas has slightly, because Mr. Jordan being in a desert community and liking the desert, and we know that the geographic location was listed as a challenge
Yes,
to
yeah.
recruitment for some of the candidates that were reached out to, right? So not everybody apparently wants to live in the desert. But Mr. Thomas is from Southern Nevada.
Yeah.
He knows Southern Nevada. He has relationships in Southern Nevada. And as Mayor Hardy has mentioned, and as my experience, so much of what we do, because we're a small town, depends on relationships and understanding where we fit and being bold in being a member of the local community because of who we are, not just sheepishly shrinking because we're the small town. And Mr. Thomas being, having that edge is of value. And we had mentioned that in the recruitment, or, discussion with you about the recruitment, right? Do we want somebody who understands Southern Nevada better than the average candidate? And so he has the edge in that. Gosh, I'm just saying, I'm kind of talking myself into a tie, if you will. So I just wanted to vocalize those things, see if some light bulb went off that really is going to help me push the scale one way or the other. And I'm still letting that mature in my mind. So I'm going to leave those statements for right now and not give you the definitive answer until I kind of let those simmer just a little bit longer right here. I'm not going to say I'm not going to answer, but I want to just kind of review them as we go. And if there's additional conversation, I'm happy to hear it. And I appreciate additional comments from my council colleagues.
Well, I'd love to hear from Councilmember Jorgensen, maybe that, and that her input, as well as anybody else's, might be able to help you out with that.
Thank you. First off, agree with what's been said, that the candidates, there were not huge red flags. Sometimes people show up and you go, whoa, okay, wait just a minute. There weren't huge red flags in the comments that were given and the explanations that were given. There were some things, just as Councilmember Walton said, that each of them seemed to be standouts in. A little, just a tiny bit more, or a tiny bit, just enough on both sides that there you go. The thing that really stands out for me, however, and does make a difference for me, because we did talk about this so much, is having a candidate that understands where we live and has a little bit of buy-in, so that their desire hopefully would be to stay. I also liked the idea that Ned said this is where he wants to retire, and he has quite a few years left to give. And I hope that that is, it can be taken at face value, and that it is a statement that we can count on, because that, for me, led me to the direction of Ned.
Okay.
Has everybody given their input then?
Not you.
But me. Okay. Is there any more, Mayor, is there any more conversation, or else I'll just give my, my 2
No,
cents?
Can I say one thing?
Well, I'm going to say something. I think we've been blessed with talent, and we've been blessed with somebody who has taken hits for the fact that we hired you, or that we hired the organization. We've taken hits because we did a personality test.
Yeah.
We've taken a hit because, make a list. We did what we did volitionally. We knew what we were doing. We knew that when we came through this process that we were going to have more than one candidate. We knew that we are unique, and we are at the same time critical for the representation of Southern Nevada, Clark County, etc. So we knew all that, and we knew that it would be unusual for somebody not to appear on Google. I mean, it's just very unusual to find somebody who hasn't had some, but not flaw, but some misunderstanding from somebody that would be easy to find. So that Google thing attracts people who like to look at Google things. The bottom line is we have 2 so far that we like, and the third one, because of medical issues, wasn't here.
Right.
So we're not in a real good position to say we're going to take the third one, but I'm thrilled that the third one didn't show, because I wouldn't have trouble with which one. And so I've written
Because
down.
he was good too.
I've written down one
Yeah.
where we did, and I've written a half and a half, because that's kind of where we all are. We were all impressed, as I hear everybody's thoughts. We were all impressed with either one is going to serve Boulder City well. We can go home and we can say, well, this will work out well. We give an offer for employment, and if they don't accept it, I got a backup. Quite frankly,
I'm hoping that we can come up to that conclusion, because that would be great, because it doesn't always work out.
right.
that, you know.
But this is great. We've got two people who are very capable, competent, and consistent with who we are and what we do, and we're very insightful on the concept of the culture and I got a new word, the authenticity of Boulder City. And they get it, and it was kind of fun to listen to that. Now, I come from a background where you have to push a button. You know, I'm in the legislature, I have to push a button.
Right.
I pushed a button.
Right.
And that's where I said Ned is that person that I think has an easier way to get relationships in the greater area that's going to be important for him as well as important for us, and that's why I said that. Ms. Booth?
I just wanted to compliment Councilman Walton, because I think he very eloquently stated the great qualities of both men. And so I so appreciate that, and I just wanted to say that because I thought he did such a wonderful job, and kind of wished I would have said a little bit more along those lines myself. But you did a great job. Thank you.
The candidates put a lot of time into, so it's nice for them to hear how much you appreciate both of the work that they put a lot of time in. Yeah.
And I just want to add in, if I believe the community could oversee or like forget about some of the thing in Chris's past employment, I think for me he would have been the number one contender. But because again we're a close knit community, probably would have been held over his head by a lot of the community. But again, yeah, Chris I think he was a fantastic candidate, but with everything said, Ned took that spot.
Okay.
Would you like to say something, sir?
Well, I think the difference I'm going to hang my hat on here, because I believe in qualities and potential and acumen and self-awareness and ability to have hard conversations, the ability to find vision for Boulder City, the ability to lead us into and through this strategic plan is equal, albeit somewhat different. I think that Mr. Thomas, his wife is teaching at a high school just over the hill. She's rooted in the community. His family is rooted in the community. Again, he has the relationships over several years of service in two different communities in southern Nevada, which will likely be very valuable for the position here. And therefore, that would tip the scale for me to Mr. Thomas.
Okay. Mayor, I believe we have a unanimous vote. Woohoo! No, oh, so that's not a vote. Sorry. I'm going to turn it over to Tammy.
So as I understand it, Madam City Clerk, this is a consensus on offering somebody a potential.
That's
Conditional
correct. A conditional offer with an amount associated with it, knowing though that could be negotiated and the actual contract would come back before the council for final approval at a public meeting.
Do I have to restate that as a motion?
Yeah, the salary range is included in the packet, so the motion should include a number.
I always let my mayor pro tem do those complicated motions.
Can I ask some questions, hopefully? Do we know what Mr. Tedder's salary was when he left?
Sorry, say that one more time?
Mr. Tedder's salary when he left, do we have the number on that?
I have asked that of finance before, like a few minutes ago, anticipating that might be asked, and
Oh,
we're
good.
just waiting. on
Okay,
that.
and then
Oh, it was 192, 656, 36.
192, say it again?
656, 36.
Do we have the amount that currently Ned Thomas is being,
Before we look that up, can we double check and make sure that it's okay to look that up in state of California? It's not, we're not allowed to look that up in consideration. I just want to make sure.
Oh, yeah, I
that
do believe that Nevada has a similar rule.
Yeah, that
Yeah,
you can't
that just
actually look at
passed.
salary before you make an offer.
Yeah,
It is public information, but the spirit of the law is to not
Okay.
look it up.
yeah, I believe Nevada just passed something similar.
okay, we're obviously going to have a discussion about this, is what I'm thinking, so that we can land somewhere between these two.
Councilmember, what I can tell you is, while I didn't ask what they're currently making, I asked what their preference within the range was that we posted,
And what did he say?
and negotiable mid to higher end of the range.
Mid to
I
high.
do believe that, it's California, so it's a different salary. It's much higher than what you're offering even at the top end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just some food for thought. I know initially that Mr. Tedder was hired with less experience. So there was much less experience, and so know that that's why he fell down, I think our overarching goal, at least, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I would just, you can definitely consider what the last city manager made as a salary. If we want to be careful to get into discussing the merits of the individual when discussing the item.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Because we really enjoyed him and miss him. But I was trying to get to the bottom of why we pay what we pay a little bit. So maybe experience would be one thing that we'd want to look at and see what kind of experience it is that we would be receiving if we received Ned as a city manager, and what that would equate to in that salary range for us.
I mean, we can offer something without the salary. In other words, we can say we offer you and the salary is negotiable within a certain range. Now, I'm going to make a statement about the salary. If somebody's moving to Boulder City and buying a home and living there, it's going to be problematic in today's climate to be able to not be close to the upper limit,
I agree.
if not the
Mayor?
upper limit.
That top of the range is actually low.
Yes, the upper limit is low
Yeah.
for today's world and even in Boulder City. So the reality is we think we are special, and so we don't have to pay as much, but the bottom line is, it is the bottom line. And so when we start saying, okay, we're only going to pay something because somebody's coming to Boulder City, we denigrate ourselves and the abilities that we expect to have and the investment that somebody has to come to Boulder City. So I am, I would be surprised if someone said that they wanted the lower end or the middle end, if not the upper end. And by the way, how far upper is the upper end? And I suspect Wendy can tell us.
I can't. I have the rounded number, but it's 211,504. I don't know what the pennies were, but do you have, no? Okay. 211,504, so not far off from what you were paying your last.
So do we need to name a salary at this point?
Well, if council didn't, then the applicant could name that in the contract, and then it would be brought to council, and the whole contract will be brought to council, and the entire contract will be subject to negotiation, including the salary. But putting a number may set an expectation for the applicant. And of course, the applicant can always ask for a different number. It's not a set in stone number.
Mr. Mayor?
Spoken like a lawyer.
Mayor?
Yes, ma'am.
The reason I ask about negotiations, because one of the key components of negotiation is fairness. So when we're negotiating with him, we need to be fair, and that includes what his capabilities are too. So I think that's the most important thing, is that we are very fair with whoever we bring into our community to do work for us. So I just wanted to say that fairness word.
And can you clarify what you just said?
I feel that when you're talking about fairness, you have to look at how long has what is the experience this person brings to the table? How much training do we have to do? We're not going to have to take this person around and introduce them to different city managers and different city people, because he's already lived here. He's already worked in North Las Vegas and in Henderson. So those are a skill set that we're not going to have to teach him. So that's part of the fairness of you're paying someone for the skill and expertise that they have. And that's what I see in Ned, is that he has those skill sets that we don't have to run around, and he could probably call the governor up and talk to the governor, and he'll take his call, I'm guessing.
So am I allowed to ask her if she's suggesting the higher number?
Yes, you can ask your colleague to.
You suggesting the highest number? Thank you.
And I think Matt can maybe tell you what, we can't say it out loud, but you could show the mayor what your computer shows, so.
Oh, this is just my notes.
Are you suggesting higher than the agendized salary range?
And
No.
that was 211?
Uh-huh.
211,504.
Yes.
Okay, I think that might have to be brought back. I mean, that's the range that's in the classic and comp at this juncture, and we'd have to,
Well, what I would do at this point in time,
yeah.
hearing the expert,
I've got something to say too.
is I would look at the higher number, simply because at that point, it's then becomes a negotiation that we hear when we finally accept the contract.
Yeah, so if I could just chime in. I was gonna say, for me, I think, 200 would be a good number for me. It is in the higher end of it, and with his experience and everything, I think that would be a good number to start with. And, I think, he's coming from California, where it is a higher end. It's probably gonna, $60,000 to $70,000 pay cut, but it's quality of life here. He's here with his family, and so I think 200 for me is comfortable.
Councilman Walton, you were saying?
Just some math for us to consider, all right? So if we take the difference between the low and the high, it's 67,623. So you could add or subtract that from the low or the high, however you want to do to get to the mid range, but the mid is 177,692. If you divide that difference into thirds, 1/3 is 22,541, 2/3 is 45,082. So if we take the high, well, we'll take the low and add 2/3. That gives you 188,963. So I do have a question. Is an annual increase is typically in the contract for the appointed staff, is that right?
Yes, and there are other financial provisions too that are in there and also may be requested in addition to the salary, just as food for thought.
Right. So I would suggest, because we can't ignore those additional items, although we did establish just not too long ago a standard, if you will, for our appointed officials and the additional financial perks, and I would suggest to my colleagues that we, when we give direction, that we follow that established pattern that we set up with the prior city manager and the city clerk and the city attorney, so that we have, some consistency there. I would also, for the benefit of the community, for the benefit of council, to establish a 3 or a 6 month probationary time where we offer the salary to start, and then after the end of that time, we do a review, and I think it should be at least enough time for us to see how the city manager meshes with this community, with staff, with council. I think 3 months might be a little shy for that, maybe 6. But give a very strong and a very reasonable offer, maybe even higher than the 2/3 above the minimum. And with, upon completion, successful completion of that probationary period, then a bump to what we want that to be, knowing that in July 1, there will be essentially a COLA, right?
Well, the contract still has to be negotiated and finalized, right? But yes, in the current appointed
Pattern.
contracts, yes, there is a cost of living with a, between 2% and 3%.
Right, so that bump would hit, mid-year of 2025, which would be nice, for a new employee, especially, and I couldn't agree with you more. Coming to Boulder City there's not the same amount of variety of housing that you're going to find in other communities. It just typically tends to be higher. And so the compensation needs to reflect that, as well as the expectations for the performance. We're not expecting mid-range performance or mediocre performance. So to give somebody who we have high expectations for doing more with less actually is a more difficult job. So I'm 100% on board with going to at least to the minimum plus 2/3 or beyond, and I could not argue with the number that Councilmember Fox put out there, or near that. But I do want to have just for our sakes, a probationary period and give a bump at that time. I like those opportunities to have them give us a working, summary of how we can expect them to be for the long term. And I hope we all do, that this person stays for more than a little bit of time, but into the long term. So I'm comfortable going to those higher ranges.
I actually, if Mr. Tedder was being paid at 200, I think that the new person that we hire with the level of expertise should be at least at 200, because coming over here, and I think Councilman Walton just hit the nail on the head, to move over to Boulder City from where he's at is going to cost him. So we're asking somebody to sell their home and move over here at that expense and pay more to live here, because we are a charming community and it's going to be worthwhile for him, absolutely. But I think we should reward the experience and the skill. And if he does not make it, then in the 3 months, which I don't foresee happening, to be honest with everybody. I don't see that happening with his years of experience. I think we're going to be very pleased with him. But I just think we need to bring him on at a pay scale that's going to be, that he can afford to come over here and live in Boulder City. So that's just what I wanted to share. Thank you.
Is there housing allowance?
That would be up to city council. That would be up to city council. That hasn't been a past practice of Boulder City.
Are you asking specifically housing allowance or cost to move, reimbursed costs to move here?
So I like the concept of cost to move more than a housing allowance.
If I could make a suggestion, sometimes you can, instead of saying, hey, we'll pay exactly the cost, show me receipts and all of that, what I'm seeing a lot of clients are doing is doing they call it a hiring incentive, which is a lump sum. They can use any which way, whether it be to relocate, get a moving truck, or call friends. And it's more about, here's $10,000 or something like that to help them out with the transition, the housing, whatever it might be, pay off student loans, whatever it might be. They can spend it however which way they want, and it covers those kinds of things. It incentivizes them and helps them with whatever costs they might have.
So if we had, this is total hypothetically, if we said to Mr. Thomas, we would like to hire you at $200,000 per year, $10,000 cost to move, and 6-month review, and after the 6-month review, do something that is in line with the cost of living of 3%? Question mark.
Yeah, the conditional offer can certainly be made in that manner. Typically, the terms of a evaluation and pay raise are worked out in the contract. But so typically with a conditional offer, the conditional offer is made with the salary, and then we provide a template contract, and then the candidate can come back with their edits to the contract and whether they conditionally accept the salary or if they're looking for a higher number. That's at that point, the candidate comes back with that, and then we bring that to council to discuss.
So today, we need to come up with a number.
Mm-hmm.
And if we today come up with a number of 200,000, for instance, and then we have a caveat that we're going to have a review in 6 months. 3 months, I think, is too short to do anything. And then we have that after they accept the offer to come at 200,000, then we negotiate the moving. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. Essentially what we're looking for today is just a number and then a conditional employment offer. We can certainly, all of the comments that council has made on the draft contract, we can take into account to present that to the applicant. But the motion we're looking for is really the number and conditional employment offer to the specific candidate name.
Go for it.
If we're ready, I could make a motion that we offer a conditional contract offer to Ned with the amount of 200,000 as the desired price.
I'll second that.
Moved and seconded, discussion.
Perfect.
All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Unanimous, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Need anything else from us? Other than public comment?
Is there anything else? Okay.
There was
That-
next steps, but next steps will just come when we do negotiate.
If I could just clarify too, what my role would be, if this now is going to be the city taking the contract and negotiating, or if there's any role that you need, and obviously any role would be doing the background and reference checks, but is there, who's going to be negotiating with the candidate? I just want to make sure I know.
Do you want to talk about that offline or?
Sure, that's fine. I wasn't sure if council needed to be a part of that decision.
We've already said what we want to do, and
Okay.
my
Yeah,
people will
that's not
talk
really
to-
agendized
Okay, great.
either.
That's fine. Okay. All right.
Right, so thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. It's nice seeing you all today.
So we've gone through item 1, and we now open it for public comment. Is there anyone here or on the line? 702-589-9629. That's 702-589-9629. Anybody who's here in the room, if you can come and form a line, sign in, that would be wonderful. And seeing no one, I'll go to the phone line, 702-589-9629. See no one on the line, no one on the phone. Meeting's adjourned. Thank you.